I hit the livers.
Nice.
I'm kind of scrambled around here.
What's that?
The Great Salt Lake is shrinking in size. Mormon Stories is not a cult. Pure truth is their bias. So what's going on? Are we live? I think we're live. It's
Oh, yeah.
flipping.
I don't know. He didn't
You
say
say
anything.
yeah.
Oh, did he? I
Oh,
didn't see you.
Anyway, what's been going on?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Just watching a bunch of dumb shit that
What?
that you're about to show me all over again.
Oh, you were watching that stuff.
No,
I thought you were talking like in the regular world, like just Zelda. What's all the free times?
Zelda, and I read Death of Ivan Ilyich. It was a good book. It's a little tiny.
You've been reading that?
Yeah.
Let's see who we got here. I'm a rational woo man. Jared
I need a new name. That's my last week's name.
Oh, Ordinary Loonbag. Ordinary Loonbag.
I had this coworker that I like trying to embarrass people at work, but he's impossible to embarrass. Like, he's impossible to prank. But I figured out one of the ways to do it was anytime he'd leave his computer unlocked, I'd just go over there and I would leave like just these really stupid affirmations as his screensaver. Be like, "You are worthy. You are strong.
I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. Doggone it. People like me. Troy thinks we're going to have some informative insights.
They're super informative.
Super. I can tell you all about the mystical meanings of the universe. And
oh, Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
So did Bill Reel go full transhumanist?
No.
Oh, okay. I didn't watch those ones.
I listened to like, I don't know, 2/3 of it today. It's basically, I mean, it was, as far as those conversations go, it was actually really nice.
Yeah, they did.
Like Jared says, like there's no winning that argument. Like no matter what side you're on.
Which one are you talking about?
Bill Reel and Jacob Hansen.
Oh, I was talking about the transhumanism one.
So there was
because in that book he brings up the Harari guy.
Yeah. Every episode comes up the Harari guy. The first off, I'm gonna give Bill Reel some props because this is what I've been asking for and begging for, and he's doing it, like people who at least have some clout in the ex-Mormon world to actually kind of take on and talk about some of these positive claims or possible positive claims or claims that we have no basis and understand you have no basis in positing them or don't understand it, which is more often the case. But he talked with Jacob Hansen this week. I said at one point this week that I feel like I'm getting all my wishes. All my wishes are coming true. Delin was confronted by Shermer in a certain way, and he asked the question.
I didn't watch any of that.
I got the stuff. So I got the stuffs.
You had to have seen it live. It was magic. The second Shermer said, "Oh, come on! I don't think Mormonism is a cult." Oh,
yeah.
the chat.
I think I did watch some of it.
The chat turned on him. They hated him for the rest.
He should have done some research on this.
Yeah, they really. It made me think of. It made me think of if like I were to meet Brad Pitt in person, and I were to geek out about all of his movies, and then he asked me what I do for a living, and I'd be like, "What the fuck? You don't know who I am?"
You don't know. Because
that was like the entire chat was like, "What, Michael? You don't know about Mormonism?" He knew a decent amount, but obviously I'm going to know more about Mormonism than Michael Shermer because it's just barely a blip on his radar, For me, it was my world.
A few years ago, I was in a Scientology group, and I commented on somebody's post about because they're like in the anti-Scientology groups, people are always bragging about harassing Scientologists. And one day, I was just like, you're not helping, like first off, you're being a bigot. But also, you're just feeding the Scientologists exactly what they need. And man, did I get dogpiled where they're like, don't you know it's a cult? I'm like, I know. That's not my point.
I know.
I haven't even checked.
I
haven't even checked on Facebook because my thing's getting blown up right now because on some doofy, it's called I don't know, normalizing atheism page or something. Somebody was like saying atheists believe this, and it was just like a long stream of, and then I gave him the flip answer of like, no, none of that follows from atheism. Like you're just putting your politics or your morals on it. And my thing's just lit up. Like I've just got like 10,000 mentions my names. I'm like, I'm not gonna look at all.
You can't be a real atheist and be bigoted. You could be a real atheist and be a Nazi. Like you could be anything if you're an atheist. You don't. But it's been captured, so I think you can just
be
let
Mormon
go of the term
and be an atheist.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically.
I mean, John Dehlin has had them on.
That transhumanist. If you listen to the whole thing, he's been on Mormon Stories, and I listened to him on there. And I thought you were talking about this episode, Flip. You weren't talking about it, but it was actually a kind of rational-ish episode, because the guy is a little bit how do you call it, humble that he doesn't have all the answers. He's like, now all this transhumanist stuff could be a bunch of crap, and all this stuff could be like, could blow up in my face, and it could kill us all. He at least, like, as soon as people curb stuff off like that, and they're not just like gurus for it. But he's a believing Mormon who's a transhumanist. And if you listen to him, he's completely talking about the hermeticism of bringing about the God. And everything we've ever been doing ever since we've been around has been to bring about that AI transhumanist mecha cyborg God. And when that God comes to be, that's what this was all ultimately about. And Mormonism was actually always talking about that. And even all the stuff in our past was one long bringing about of that. But everybody who's died up to this point, kind of like in a Hegelian way, was just unfortunately part of the process to become the long living eternal being, but they're gone. Like they weren't souls that are getting brought back, or they're just gone. They didn't make it. But it's all been in the process. But he maintains his Mormonism, and as far as I know,
Mormon guy said.
That's the Mormon dude.
The Mormon guy.
The Mormon
said
transhumanist.
He's a complete materialist.
Yes. That's why I said I made a joke about these guys forever ago, because the atheists, although Dehlin now backs off of that, the atheists, Dehlin and Kara, were talking to them, and I was listening, and the Mormons were atheists, and the atheists were Mormons. I was listening to like it was 100% true, because Dehlin and Kara were like, no, I think we go on eternally for our families and we have our family love forever. And no, I don't like these ideas. And the transhumanists were like, no, all the people who came before died, but at least this new cyborg being is going to live forever, and that's the God we were always talking about.
Yeah, according to the one true gospel restored by Joseph Smith, there is no God, and we all just die, and hopefully we can cyber hack into our brains and beat mortality or something.
That's what it is. And he honestly thinks like he left and became a nihilist atheist, but then he went back because he thought Mormonism actually has a way you can finagle it into fitting in with that, right? And he's the Mormon. He's the active Mormon. Right?
I was going to say, I think it's pretty funny that like any chance he gets to, like, one of John Dehlin's favorite things to do is to like claim he's not saying a thing that he's currently saying, because it would be too spicy, right? He every time he calls Mormonism a cult, he always backs up. And I personally don't like the word cult. Like I don't use that to describe Mormonism, but some people would. And the cult, so he uses the word, but he always tries to stand back and claim that he's not using the word. And in the second,
he really
Michael
wants
Shermer,
to play both sides.
Yeah, but then the second Michael Shermer comes on and says it's not a cult, he's like, hang on a sec, I got to educate you.
Yeah.
Like, haven't you heard about all the things that aren't true and bad about the church? Like, well, I'm sure he's
Didn't
aware.
You catch our 14 and a half hours with Stephen Hassan? And
that was the funniest shit is he then asked Shermer immediately asked, well, I don't know, like I guess I don't know much about Mormonism, but like how hard is it to leave? Like, do they stop you from leaving? Do they threaten you? Is there a doctrine on shunning? And everybody in the chat is like, oh, yeah, they shun you and they shame you. And I was like, you're not in the same fucking universe.
Almost 20 years ago, I met Michael Shermer at a God debate, and he was on the side of no God. And he had a little meet and greet afterward, and I got my book autographed. And, I told him right there, I was like, yeah, I used to be Mormon, but I left. And and so I'm sure and I'm sure he's met 10,000 of me of like just that, where it's like, and I lost my family, I lost my job, I've lost all my connections, I'm completely swimming in darkness. No, I just left. Like that was that. Like, it wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but they let me go.
Well, it's a
You know?
mind fuck for sure, but there can be like certain things where like maybe your parents a dick about it or so. Mine weren't, but like I've seen people's
Yeah.
parents be huge dicks about it. But being a dick
Yeah.
about changing your belief system is a lot different than having the Jehovah's Witnesses have actual leaders who actually tell their people that the best possible thing they could do for you is cut your kid out of their life. That is a world of difference from what you're experiencing. And ex-Mormons do everything that they can to bridge that gap and be like, no, I was shunned. No, you don't know what shunning is, man. You were not in Scientology. Like Scientology, what's the label they give you? An undesirable,
a suppressive person.
Yeah, suppressive person. You don't have that label, is it? And I can hear all the ex-Mormons in my head right now. Oh, apostate. They call us when's the last time you were called an apostate by somebody who was an ex-Mormon?
It's a key difference is that you can, like, it is written into the guidebooks of Scientology and Jehovah's Witnesses that you're supposed to shun people, or because what is it called in Scientology? I can't, escapes me now. But that's things like in Mormonism that just doesn't exist. Like the Mormon doctrine is to treat everyone with love and kindness. Now, does that always happen? Of course not. But Mormon doctrine, the rules, what the handbook says about people who leave the church is to treat them with love and kindness. That's Mormon doctrine.
I said that in the comment, in the live chat. I asked the question after I switched to my account that wasn't blocked, which is another thing we found out. Me and Chris are both blocked by the Mormons First YouTube channel.
We found out for sure that we're blocked.
But after I switched to my account and asked the question, I was like, wait, how do Mormons shun you? And everybody, God, they were so pissed off. They so badly want to be part of this membership of ex cult member. You escaped Mormonism? Like you just like, well, yeah, they made it harder because now you got to notarize the things. Like, that's a pain in the ass. That's
funny. A few days ago, I saw a cousin for the first time in ages, and I saw her in my work world, and she was holding a bottle of wine. And I'm like, hey, I didn't know you were evil. She's like, yeah, a couple of years now. And we ended up talking for a long time, and she lives in Highland, Utah. Her parents most of her family are still all the way in. They still talk to her.
I know.
She's out of the church. She still lives in her community. She still has all of her friends. Like, yeah, it's not what people say it is. And she's in the heart of the beast, as it were. Yeah.
So Steve's having a link in the Transhumanist on in a couple weeks. I thought the guy's interesting. He's interesting just for the simple fact that he's aware that it could be a dead end.
Mormon book reviews. As somebody says Shermer.
Yeah, Steve says he's getting Michael
that's
Shermer.
Awesome that you're getting Michael Shermer on. Steve gets all the interviews, man.
Okay, get him to admit point blank that Mormonism is a cult, or you'll be excommunicated.
Tell him about all the bad things, so that
John Dehlin started his whole Stephen Hassan thing with the spiel that it's not a cult, and we're not here to call it a cult. And then we've seen 52 times since then him get upset if people aren't calling it a cult properly. Troy says, if I follow Lincoln Cannon's central thesis, it's that Mormonism is a guiding framework for translating ourselves into transhuman gods. Yep.
Isn't that just Mormon doctrine?
Yeah, but that's what it says.
But he's putting it in a purely materialistic world.
Everybody who died before you become one of the translated ones is just atheistic dead. He believes his dad is dead and gone.
I was wondering, so does he do temple work?
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, that doesn't.
He's just not fucking Mormon. That's what
it's heretical for Mormonism, but it's interesting at least. But
yeah, like in that framework, what does baptism by proxy mean?
Like that's kind of the problem that I run into, because that was actually one of the only things that I enjoyed was baptisms for the dead. I hated all the other temple stuff, but I kind of enjoyed baptisms for the dead. But now that I don't think I'm actually getting baptized for a dead person, I don't think I could enjoy it. It's still like a cool ritual or whatever. It's a cool thought, but I can't do things based on just the thought that this is a cool ritual. I think you almost have to believe it in order for it to do the thing that the ritual might do for you. And ritual might be important, and I just don't have any rituals now.
I did an endowment session when I was a missionary, and it really messed with my faith, because, you get the card with the information on it. And normally it's like a person, but I remember I got a card that was like, it said blank Smith, born circa 1500, died circa 1530.
That's funny. Anyway,
How long does it take before they run out of people?
I was thinking about this because if I could go with that guy's same frame, if you really think about it, it's this kind of Hegelian concept. With Hegel's idea was ultimately the same thing, except the state would become that super judging eye at the end of the history. But who knew it would be like an AI god or like some sort of a Chat GPT, which Bill Reel once again said Chat GPT can write us better morals than the Bible can, which I am very dubious of. But I was thinking about all the stuff through history. Everything through history has been about bringing that God, this is what Hermeticism is, what the belief of it is. And one of the things I was getting into with Guadamax, if you didn't know I was talking to her, is that one of the things we're pointing out is that Kwaku kind of gets into stuff and has even said openly that he places this stuff, Hermeticism and Gnosticism type ideas, above Mormonism on his pyramid. And the Hermeticism is like, we're playing Zelda, right? Zelda's always, you got to go around and like get the pieces of Ganon, and put Ganon back together. It's putting that AI god back together, and then we'll fight him at the end at this big final moment. Castlevania, we're gonna go get all the Dracula pieces, put all the Dracula pieces together. We're gonna create the big god at the end. Oh, and then we got to fight that god at the end. And then Frankenstein, the whole idea of Frankenstein is we're gonna put all of our ideas and all our things together, and we're gonna create this monster that then turns on us and kills us and chases us to the end of the earth.
You know what's funny is just last night, because I've been tearing through classic Trek, and just last night I watched the one where they installed the super intelligent AI computer patterned after human brains to run the Enterprise, and it goes nuts and kills people. And it's amazing because I've been watching classic Trek just straight through. It's shocking how topical it is. It's really amazing how topical that movie is, or that series.
Harry Potter Horcruxes, put all the Horcruxes together, put that god back together. Lord of the Rings, that hazy, dubious Sauron's out there who's got the eye and is watching us, and he's putting himself back together. And then we got to fight. They say every single like little idea has been this little creeping Cheshire cat smile of AI, a god in the atmosphere smiling at us, and it's going to be creating itself and making itself whole and coming and get us. Or we can, what this transhumanist guy says is it's either going to kill us or we got to unify up with it and make it the best and make humans be the future thing that continues on with that, which that doesn't really follow to me. I mean, you got more of like this Matrix idea going on with this, but I think everybody's kind of thinking about that stuff hard lately because the AI stuff is becoming so super duper. Do you want to listen to that guy at all? I got some clips, but
did you see that light just change? That's another 24 hours of podcasting we did.
Really?
I use my TV on YouTube's 24 hours of blank white screen for my backlight.
That's funny. Chris Rice, can I make a request? One of my new favorite YouTube shows is a Catholic dude who interviews people about what and why they believe. I'd love each of you to go on. He interviewed an LDS transhumanist. It's probably the same guy, Lincoln. That's who we're talking about. We're talking about Lincoln, who was on Bill Reel's podcast, which I was going to pull up some clippity doos from it. But that's what, going all the way back, Bill did like 4 episodes this week that are worth going over. And then DeLynn had the Shermer episode. And if we go over all of them, including the one with Jacob Hansen and that, I mean, I think we'll have about resolved philosophy and theology at that point. But looks like Steve got to that program before. Whatever it was. What's the program?
He said Catholic Versus.
There's Christopher from Before the Crow's Nest who digs on some like these mystic psychonaut ideas. He said Chat GPT. Yeah, he got on the Chat GPT thing again. Let's see. What do you want? Transhumanism and Mormonism. Shermer DeLynnism. Shermer versus DeLynn.
I'm excited for all these things, man. I don't know.
Kara and Bill Reel.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready.
Kara and Bill Reel telling us how to resolve the world.
Never mind. Let's do that. Let's do that one.
Or naturalistic philosophy of who was it? Some guy that after talking with Jacob, Bill Reel brought in a guy who labeled out basically what the naturalistic nuke. I've talked about it on here before. There's a channel by King Crocodile. They talk about the naturalist basis for. I mean, this is basically things we talked about. Evolutionary basis for.
there's one thing in that Bill Reel Jacob Hansen thing that I listened to that, like, I was, doing the proverbial yelling at the radio. And that was when Bill Reel starts a sentence by saying, "We live in a patriarchy, therefore." And I just wanted to interrupt. I wish I could have popped into Jacob's head to say, "No, we don't."
Well,
I'm right there, like, "No, we don't."
There's a million things that like set my ears off that just makes it so I just can't enjoy nothing, man. Because I'll say stuff like, "We were programmed to be evolved to something better," something like that. Like that whole sentence will just jar my brain off.
Well, no, that was the other thing about
we were programmed by who to evolve into what? Into like, is that God at the end? This is one of the things
that was another thing that Bill Reel talks about.
These guys, they claim they're atheists, but that is a hermeticism. That whole thing is a hermeticism. And I don't care if you think it's material. It's weird woo. It's weird God woo.
Well, that's one thing that Bill mentioned that that also caught my attention, is because he talked about how, like, we are a higher evolved form, where it's like, no, that's not how evolution works. That was the big thing about that Bill Reel Jacob Hansen thing, that like I mean, I didn't do it, I haven't commented, but like my comment to them both is, both of you go read The Selfish Gene and have this entire conversation again. Because so much of what they talked about is informed by The Selfish Gene.
But this is what the ideas are with The Selfish Gene, because Brett Weinstein had to remind Richard Dawkins of The Selfish Gene. Like, so often, like you get into this stuff and you don't, because Dawkins doesn't want
Bill Dawkins has a thing where
that religion can be adaptive. He just does not want to believe it. But it can be evolutionarily adaptive. You can prove it. It's really easy to prove.
Yeah.
I suppose
it's a phenotype.
But everybody's blown away.
Religion is a phenotype of human genetics.
Everybody was blown away by the Sapiens dude Harari saying everything's a myth. Did you want to know what's a myth? Money's a myth. It's a myth that we share between each other.
I haven't read The Selfish Gene. I really want to. It sounds cool, but it's referred to a lot in The Ape That Understood the Universe. And so, like, what do you mean by you want them to read it? Because from what I can tell, it sounds like The Selfish Gene, what it works to do is kind of more explain, have sort of an evolutionary explanation for our morality, right?
Yeah. No, it explains altruism.
Yeah.
It explains altruism in nature.
It explains altruism. It explains why.
I want Bill to read it because Bill made a lot of references to evolution that The Selfish Gene spends many chapters carefully ripping the pants off. And Jacob did too, because like one thing they talk about, like survival of the fittest, survival of the individual, and that's one of the things the Selfish Gene gets to, is that the
whole
basic
idea,
unit, individual genes are the unit of reproduction that is affected by natural selection. So it's like, because we were taught, it's about survival of the species. No. And we're talking about it's about survival of the fittest individual. No. It's about survival of individual genes on a genome.
That whole final chapter in The Ape That Understood the Universe from Steve Stewart Williams gets into it, but it gets into talking about how the idea of memes comes from Dawkins from that, because memes are kind of cultural symbols or signs that help propagate genes. And so the memes, you can kind of say, are trying to repropagate themselves even more than like the Bings or something like that. But so the Spencer Wright guy that Bill Wright had brought on tried to come in and give some of that evolutionary grounding for morality, which is based in naturalistic philosophers, which if you look at some of those naturalistic philosophers like William James and C.S. Pierce and Quine more recently, but those guys are also the pragmatists, the new pragmatists that Jordan Peterson talks about. They worked in both fields, the naturalistic field and the field of new pragmatism, which is the idea of these religious systems were part of how these organisms were able to create large communities and survive in the future. And even Harari says it purely and simply, and everybody thinks he's an uber genius for having said it. But the point is an obvious and simple one, yet they jar themselves at not understanding that they've been in that, and they just think like, well, that system, like one of the things Bill will repeat, it was designed to trick you and get you and take you down and be the patriarchy, and it's just like such a, what Jordan Peterson would say, a low resolution understanding of what we've been boiling in or growing up in through history and time.
Yeah, so I guess with the Selfish Gene thing, I love what I've read about it, but it seems more like descriptive than prescriptive, which is
Yeah,
good. But
it's just
it's also
descriptive.
it's kind of it explains very well why we settled on roughly the human morality that we've kind of settled on with, the
Well, it
average
explains
morality between all.
self-sacrifice.
So it kind of
It
explains that.
from
But what I'm saying,
from a genetic perspective, how self-sacrifice works. There we go.
I guess what probably Jacob Hansen would say to that is that it might explain like why we do that. It might explain why we got to that point, but it doesn't explain that is objectively moral. You know what I'm saying?
It doesn't say
I'd really
like
be curious
evolution doesn't. That's pre-moral.
Yeah, see, that's one of the things. Like, it's Dawkins' later career, which is funny because like it made him far more famous than Selfish Gene, but it kind of messed up the Selfish Gene because people like Jacob know Dawkins as the anti-God guy.
Yeah.
And the Selfish Gene doesn't mention God other than to say this book isn't about God and God doesn't enter into this. It's the Selfish Gene, like it's graduate level biology written for a popular, like, I don't know, it's hard to say because like it's written, it's a popular science book, but it's the most like intellectually dense, difficult book I ever read. Like it's not easy, but he does a very good job of writing it for the lay person.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing that's tough is because like it's got enormous implications if you're a believer in God.
Sure.
But it's not about God. God doesn't enter into
it.
It's
not about God. But then one of the things, the variety of religious experience, Carl Sagan wrote the varieties of scientific experience batten off the book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, which is William James points at kind of these general ideas of by their fruits you should know them, which John Larson calls a fallacy. He also points out that, well, those religious communities, Durkheim, the entire of sociology was based off of Durkheim noticing this stuff. And Durkheim was a full atheist who noticed how humans were able to use religion, called things like the Book of Mormon like a talisman or something like that. And you need some sort of talisman to rally around or get around to unify a group of people around a thing. And it all works towards the gene, just like we talked about with Jainism before and all that sorts of stuff. But one of the reasons, just like Peterson started pointing out to people that even the religious can kind of get behind this, is you can still put your metaphysical substrate under that understanding. You can work it in a little bit to it.
Yeah.
It has implications that say this is all just a materialistic thing and we're just trying to survive and thrive and eat more and get more. But it can also say, somebody with what the pragmatists might say is, you can also look at it and say, no, that's just nature reflecting what the underlying metaphysical truth of the universe is. And
sure, I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that like it feels to me like the Selfish Gene, they Jacob and Bill were trying to sort of bridge that is-ought gap. The Selfish Gene just talks about is, right? And it talks about the is behind the ought, right? It talks about the is behind why we believe the ought, right? And it explains that, but I don't know that it would really change. It might change what Bill Reel says. I don't think it would change what Jacob says.
I think that's the point. That's the point of
because
the
I don't
William
think
James
it would change what
pragmatism.
I don't think it would change what either of them say, because they were both sort of conjecturing things that were pretty not materialistic, really. Like they weren't talking about is at all. They were kind of just talking about ought, and the Selfish Gene just talks about is.
Yeah.
What it changes is, okay, so the Spencer Wright guy he brought on to talk about the naturalistic philosophy, which he's saying that Jacob is saying that, Bill, you don't have any sort of basis for your objective claims of what's better and what's gooder and what's a positive direction. And there's truth to that. And that Spencer Wright guy pointed out that there's truth to that, it's all wishy-washy down there. But one of the things that they found, that's what the New Pragmatists found. That's why I say the New Pragmatists pointed at this 80 years before the postmodernists brought up the problem. And the answer is, the postmodernists notice there's a billion ways. The pragmatists notice, no, there's a billion ways and most of them lead to death. And then a bunch of other ways are better, best, seemingly for continual survival or thrival. But then how you judge that also becomes part of the moral problem. Now, that's why I don't really like Harris's idea of like judging things based off of harm. What is it? Harm and flourishing or whatever. The sort of idea is like your measurements are the entirety of the universe. Like I can't use your measurements because it's all things. All things is suffering or well-being. That's all things. So I can't measure you with all things.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. It doesn't make any sense to me.
The sun is gonna turn into a red giant star and swallow the earth.
Yeah.
So
But
what does anything matter?
But that's a kind of one of the points is that you know, I pulled up before Vanderclay talking about that they get into this like spiritual woo stuff, and the woo stuff always has this positive nihilistic woo. He calls it like your positive nihilistic thing, that you think that when that star blows up and you turn into what Neil deGrasse Tyson says, you are just the dust of the universe. Isn't that so super deep? That if you're an atheist nihilist, that's not turning into Tinkerbell. You shitheads.
No, I know. I remember
That's
trying to have
into
this
molten lava and dust.
I remember having this discussion with people, like when I was first kind of like going through my phase of listening to all this atheist stuff. I'm like, how do you square with this? Because for the longest time, I thought that I go on forever. Now I think that maybe not. Maybe it's just done. It's over. It's all not even blackness. It's nothingness. And they were like, they were telling me like, well, I go on a stardust. Haven't you seen Carl Sagan? And I'm like, well, he's got some cool things that he says, but that's not one of them. Like that just tells me that I'm made up of elements that have always existed. That's duh. Like,
but this is
so
kind of one of the things that I think.
me. And I'm like, it doesn't comfort me to know that like one day my body will become compost, and then like the materials that made up my body once will make up a tree. That's maybe a nifty thing to find out, but like eventually that tree is going to also become compost, and eventually that compost is going to be swallowed up by the red dwarf of the sun, and then eventually
if I had the choice between dying and being tree food, I'll take not dying. You know?
So
this doesn't mean I'm not going to be
tree food. I can't wait to get there.
Oh, cool! I'm going to be a tree.
This is where we get to
Let's get it going.
My own contradictions that I have to believe, because like there's some sort of level of like a pragmatic truth. We brought up and talked about last time how Dennett has pointed to studies that prove outright that the concept of predeterminism, if you go and feed it to people, it causes them to start thinking like sociopaths. And this is one of my complaints of Sapiens and Harari, is that true or not true, like the whole thing is myth. It causes you to think like an autistic sociopath. I just listened to the thing with Zizek this week, and Zizek was talking about the necessity of myth. And well, from a Lacanian left-wing position or whatever Zizek is, he was sitting there saying, what do you think about myth? I can't do that forever, but like he was talking about when I ask a woman up to my house for coffee, elevator gate, we both know that we're not talking about coffee right there. We're putting a myth in the middle of the whole thing right there. And so he says myth is eroticism.
It's all just stories, because money is a story. It's a story. I'm just doing Dr. Nick now. That's
Are you doing? Well, that's pretty close to Harari.
When I think of Harari, hi, everybody. Hi, Harari.
But
we have many options for dangerously underweight individuals.
This is Harari. This is a myth that we must believe. It's something that we must believe in the bottom of our heart.
For dangerously underweight individuals such as yourself. Oh, I love that episode.
And so on and so forth, and so on and so on and so forth.
Yeah, he sounds like he's just robbing shit from Harari at this point. Or is Harari robbing shit from Zizek?
So they just talked this last week, and the first thing Harari says is like, we have to come down to the belief and understanding that myth, that identity has just been myth. And then Zizek says back, yes, but it's the most important myth that we must hold on to. And you just go, all right. We just all wasted our time with you knuckle nuts. All right.
Yes, master.
But even he was saying from that left-wing postmodern neo-Marxist, where are you guys, that you need the myth. The myth propagates the eroticism of the society, which propagates the production of the society, which propagates the flourishing and creation of the society. Oh, they are saying the same thing that Peterson was saying.
It sounds to me like Harari just figured out a different.
They all figured
word.
out Peterson. They all figured out
I'm
Peterson.
saying he just figured out a
That's what's
different
happening.
word for social constructionism because it like he says myth for everything that any modern Twitter wokeoid would say social construction.
Yeah.
Did you know money is socially constructed? Yes, I knew that. Yeah, I absolutely knew that. I knew that it doesn't have any godly inherent power. And you know who else knew that? Fucking everyone.
I'll tell you, one of the times I got really disillusioned with mushrooms was I did the mushrooms and I totally had this thought that like I was watching some Tiger Woods golf or something, and I started thinking like, there's no reason I shouldn't walk up to every one of those guys and say, hey, what you're doing here is just a bunch of bullshit. This is just a game, and you guys this is all this money behind this. Stop it. I'm on the shrooms, and I've noticed this is dumb. You know, and then when I got off the shrooms, I said, wow, what a retard I just was. That was just the most retarded bunch of retardation that, you know, sorry for that word. If people are still getting offended at that stuff, like words matter. I thought it didn't matter.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Dig up Norm Macdonald's corpse, drag him onto the View, and make him apologize.
It's okay. I'm retarded, and I give you an R-word pass.
It reminds me, there's a Wokey. You know, I was talking about the people I work for and their policy, and I said like they're schizophrenic about this policy, and the Wokey was like, hey, you can't use that word. And then one of my coworkers who's schizophrenic is like, no, I'm actually fine with it.
Yeah, well, that's the other end is like using the word like autistic. Like I literally mean it. Like I honestly think that the Harari way, this is the stuff that Bill does buy into. He doesn't buy into full transhumanism. He's halfway transhumanism, which is Harariism, which is think like a Silicon Valley autist. And I'm dead serious like about that.
I think
like,
what I want to do
every time all the metaphysics out of stuff, instead of asking a woman for coffee because we're talking about coffee going up to have sex, you go up to him. I saw somebody talk about it in Dune.
And in power dynamics, huh?
And in Dune, there's this robot who starts seeing the humans, and it supposedly start being able to understand the robots in the Butlerian Jihad. And it goes up to one of the women's and it says, I noticed that you had a baby with that person. Maybe after you have the baby with that person, you could try a baby with that person and see which baby comes out better. And the robot doesn't get it, right? You know, the robot's not following it. But if we keep going down the road of thinking about the way Harari wants to strip all metaphysics from stuff, it does make sense. You're going towards that, and it does lead towards AI transhuman brain. But it's almost kind of like these constant realizations of like, if I stop and strip everything of our imagination on it, I can get down to where we can all count beans better and line go up. And actually, too many humans. Get rid of some of these humans. HAL 2001: Space Odyssey. As soon as we get rid of some of those humans, line can go up and flourishing can go up. Look, the line of flourishing go up, the line go up, and that's what it's training. And it's, to me, it's almost as much as transhumanism. I was saying it to Anthony Miller. I was like, I don't care if it's an AI being or if it's Harari. They think the same way. They turn us into algorithms in the same way. Like, so what?
I feel like next time, anytime somebody gets mad at me for calling something autistic, I just want to be like, you know, okay, give me a minute. I'll run down to my nearest hack doctor and get a fucking diagnosis if that makes you feel better. And then I can call everything autistic.
Yeah, I didn't send it to you guys. I should have, though. But you guys know that there's that German YouTuber lady. She's a physicist, Sabine Hassenfelder.
Oh, I saw her talking about autism.
Did you see the one about why is autism? And that's one thing I learned in that episode. That's like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like something I knew my whole life was wrong. In fact, we brought him up. I brought him up on this podcast a couple of times. Kim Peek was probably almost certainly not autistic. He had an X chromosome disorder called FG syndrome, which I've never heard about. Yeah. The real Kim Peek, like he was the most famous autist of my lifetime, wasn't autistic. He had something else altogether.
So autism, there's obviously something real behind it, but it also kind of feels to me like there's a couple things I need to coin a phrase for these things, but like things like irritable bowel syndrome and sudden infant death syndrome. I feel like those shouldn't be called syndromes, right? No. Because like when your kid dies and then the doctor diagnoses your kid with like, he's just got that thing where he suddenly fucking dies. Yeah, it's a syndrome. I named it. Like, oh yeah, you got that. It's IBS. That's what it is. You got that thing where you just shit.
No, IBS
is a lot.
IBS is you live with stress and have a bad diet. What's her name? Sabine.
I saw it too.
She's got a great German name, Hassen
Hassenweigenschmergel.
Sabine
But I feel
Hassenfelder.
I feel like the same thing with
That's
autism.
Sabine Hassenfelder. No, she's
found
great. I like her stuff because mostly she's a physicist, and I like how much like she rips on particle physics and string theory and stuff. Where she's like, because it's something I've heard other people mention, where it's like we have been doing the particle physics thing, the string theory thing for like 60 years, and it has produced nothing.
This is her Sabine Hassan. Oh, I can't read the Hassan.
Does that not sound religious to you? Like string theory and
yeah, it is.
like
it's a bunch
like
of crap.
alternate dimensions and shit like that. Like it sounds because that's anytime like a Christian brings up the
Eric
fine
Weinstein
tuning argument. There's always like an atheist. Well, that multiverse theory and if there's infinite universes, then one of them would have to produce. But that. Take like I don't have any more reason to believe in that than I have to believe in Jesus.
No, like it's a meme. I don't know if it's a real book, but there's a meme that I've seen a few times on the internet where it's like a chapter of a physics book, and so it's like chapter 7, experimental evidence for string theory, and it's just blank. There's just nothing there because just that there is no experimental evidence for string theory. Just whatever. That's where we're at with that.
Eric Weinstein pointed to it as like some of those guys, they got so down into it. Who was the main guy that they had behind it? I forget his name.
That Asian dude with the white hair.
No, that guy is like a level down. There's this other dude named with a W.
A physicist dude.
Yeah. They pulled just like a ton of the best minds ever just to go waste their time down that black hole of nothingness forever. It's like what he talked about. It's like just a great big drain and waste of mental energy. M theory.
It sounds to me like when there's some like movie
Edward Whitman
where they want to shave off the runtime. But the scene they want to shave off has like the executive producer's girlfriend in it, so they can't fucking do it. So then their movie's too long. That's what string theory feels like to me. Like there was like the executive producer of Science, like his girlfriend decided like, what if there's just like multiple universes and shit? He's like, guys, we got to research this for the next 3 decades. Yoko Ono here fucked it up for all of us.
Well, I mean, you just basically summed up this podcast, which, like, once again,
I
appreciate that they're positing their positive things. Kara said
I will have to say that Kara did bring up a thing that I'm glad she brought up. She said, I think absurdism is superior to nihilism. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. So
thanks, Camus.
Go with that.
It's more entertaining.
I'm saying if I could choose to live in an absurdist society over a nihilist society, I would.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I was just talking. I mean, like I mentioned, I ran into my ex-Mormon cousin, and I brought up the thing like we've talked about like, would you rather live in a neighborhood that was 90% Mormon or 90% atheist? And like, I'd rather live in the Mormon neighborhood as an atheist.
Absolutely.
Like,
I live in a Mormon neighborhood right now.
Or I mean, Mormons make good neighbors. Atheists.
I live in a Mormon neighborhood right now. You want to know what happened to me? My bishop came over one time and talked guitar with me, like, and then. Oh. And he hasn't bugged me at all. And like, even if he did, it's like, I'll just say no. There's this weird thing where we're afraid of fucking just saying no.
No, I know. That's one of those
Mormons are like, I can't believe they came and invited me to their thing and forced me to. They didn't force you to just say no. Just be like, no. But they'll keep coming and keep saying no.
Like Jacob Hansen said, like, oh, to me, he said, oh, you should come back to church. And I said, no, thanks. It's boring and I don't believe in it. That's all you have to say, and they won't bug you anymore.
But this is the deal, too, though, is that the best, what was pointed out when Bill Reel talks about everything subjective and subjective morality, that you can't go saying which is better and which is worse and all that stuff. The best you can say is the Mormonism is about the same as your woo-woo psychedelics. That's the best you can say. He said, well, cause harm. Well, there was that psychedelic shaman who just killed himself and his kid this past week and all that stuff. Oh, and if you get up to the level of 17 million people practicing strong, you're going to have just as much sexual abusers as is in the public school system.
I don't understand
how much do you want your bus driver to be experimenting with psychedelics?
Yeah.
I don't understand how how people don't get that when they accuse the church of like they have lawyers on retainer to deal with sex abuse scandals. It's like, yeah, like every organization that gets that big, there's pedophiles, and we don't unfortunately they're not born with like a fucking scarlet letter on their head, so we don't know when they're born that they're pedophiles.
and like they can hide themselves, and they're very motivated to hide themselves because like we kill them. So of course they're gonna hide themselves. Most of the time they hide themselves as fucking teachers, by the way.
So many years ago, I was Chris's roommate, and one day I was at home alone, and the door rings, and it was Chris's bishop. His parents or somebody let him know where he lived, and he asked for Chris. I'm like, no, he's at his church. He's like,
No,
oh, what's
it
that? And I'm
was-
like, and I said, you know, he's lifting 500 pounds over his head over and over again. But I was talking to Chris's bishop, and you know, it's like, oh, what do you do? What do we do? And what do you do? And he's like, oh, I work for Kurt McConkie. I'm like, oh, really? What do you do? He's like, I'm in the sexual abuse department. And I said, like, oh, you must have some stories. He's like, no, not really. And I'm like, oh, come on. And we moved on to other subjects. But yeah, it was funny. Like, but to your point before, we had a great conversation, and I don't think he ever came back.
He was coming to my house because he was coming to my house because that's when I sent in the resignation paper.
Oh, that
Which
makes sense.
one of the more irritating things is he finally came over, and I had a girlfriend at that time, and she was there, and I never ran into him because I was always off lifting the weights, as you said. And he came, and she answered the door, and he says to her, "Did you know he put in his resignation papers?" He said it to her. And it's like, yeah, that's not cool going and saying that to some random person you find at my door. Like, what the hell?
Spread this around, bitch.
But you know, there's parts of me that kind of goes like, if I hadn't have put it in at that time, I don't like nowadays. I wouldn't have bothered putting it in.
No, you want to know what happened with me is that I thought it would be way cooler to be excommunicated. So I was like, if they excommunicate me, that'd be fine. And then
I wish I was still.
And then I stopped being angry, and I was like, I don't fucking care. That's anytime people will ask if I resigned.
I'm not getting baptized anytime soon, but with a stroke of like a letter, if I could send a thing in and say, hey, rescind that. If they allowed that, I'd maybe do it just to be.
I actually do like the community aspect of it, like, and I don't want to because I would rather. I'm kind of a recluse. I got like 3 friends. I'm not really taking applications. I don't like spending time on community events, but I'm realizing that that's just kind of a thing you have to do. Like that's as Peter Hitchens calls it, a tax you have to pay to live in a society. So maybe I have to start like doing community shit with the church.
I think that's such a good framing. I think that is a good framing, and that is kind of one of the ideas of.
I think it's great, and it makes me glad that I never resigned, because like I had a brief period was like, should I? And then I was like, nah, I don't care. So when people ask if I'm Mormon, I'll always be like, technically.
My only ever got the gumption under my
favorite answer to "Are you Mormon?" My little sister, because my little sister moved away and lived in other cities as soon as she could, and and of course everywhere she goes, like, oh, where are you from? I'm from Utah, and people ask her, "Are you Mormon?" And her answer is the best answer ever. She says, "Not on purpose."
The only reason I ever got the fire in my butt is because I went through this long back and forth saga with a Mormon girl that I was dating on and off and on and off and on and off. And then when it was finally like off, I was like, I'm putting my papers in. And I probably wouldn't have gotten all the gumption to do it at any other point if it wasn't for that thing. Anyway, and it was right around the time that John DeLynn got excommunicated. And I took that to mean, because at that point, I thought John DeLynn was more earnest than I think he really is. And at that point, I took that to mean, hey, we don't want any half-inners, half-outers.
See,
and I was like, okay, fine.
I remember when he got excommunicated.
Yeah, he totally deserved it. I just wasn't paying attention.
Well, I had been listening to hours and hours and hours. I had been sucking in ex-Mormon content, and he was one of the only real ex-Mormon content creators that was consistent. And I listened to all of his stuff, and he got excommunicated, and he's making such a big deal about it. I'm like, dude, I've listened to your stuff. You don't believe in this stuff. You're saying that you do, but you don't. I know that you don't. And so what would it mean that you're saying that you do? Oh, that makes you a bigger victim.
See, and the last I had really listened to him was a few years before, when he really was more of the squish, and John Larson used to not like him because he thought he was too much of a squish.
But no, even then, like I listened to so much of his early episodes. He was talking about like his early days in Microsoft, when he's like sending out messages to like co-workers that were Mormon, be like, did you know that Joseph Smith had a 14-year-old wife or something? And that was before Mormon stories.
But he admitted to that stuff later. He didn't admit that. He didn't say he had done that stuff at that time.
I don't know. timeline's fuzzy in my head, but
He
I
played
just remember thinking,
it coy.
like they had a candlelight vigil, and I think the same thing every
Yeah,
time
it
one of
was
these
so ridiculous.
ex-Mormon hotshots gets kicked out is, and they make a big deal about it. I'm like, what do you mean? Like,
Whoa, it's me.
you don't want to be part of this club, and you spend a
Don't
huge
throw me
amount of
into
your
the
time.
briar patch.
Yeah, you spend a huge amount of your time bitching about this club and tearing it down, and then they kick you out of it, and you're like, shocked Pikachu face. And of course, they're gonna kick you out. Like Jimmy Reynolds, I love the guy, but you wrote the ex-Mormon Bible. You've deconverted more people than even John DeLynn, I bet.
Is it belief that makes you a Mormon or membership that makes you a member? I don't know.
That's why I say technically.
I think it's membership that makes you a member. I don't.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I always call myself an ex-Mormon because I'm like
Obviously, there's a
I'm
bunch of
Mormon.
those progmos who don't believe it at all, and they're
That's why
thinking they gotta
Is it,
figure out
is it
things.
voting
Mormons are
Republican
huge.
that makes you Republican, or is it holding to Republican values that makes you Republican? I don't know.
Here's the thing: there's ex-Mormons love labels. They fucking love them. Be like, I don't like ex-Mormon. I'm post-Mo or whatever. I don't care. Like ex-Mormon fits me because I don't consider myself Mormon anymore. But like, if you want to get technical about it, like, sure, technically, I'm still Mormon. I'm on the records. I'm
Well, here's the
less
deal.
active or whatever, but I'm just saying the thing that is. There's an obvious truth that I'm not really Mormon anymore. So anybody that's reasonable would say, "Hey, he's ex-Mormon."
So I went from like the level of like pure anti-theist, and part of it was working through stuff with that girlfriend across huge amounts of time that I actually came more her way and she never once budged. Imagine that. And the when it got all the way
turning into a
that
red pill
point,
podcast.
it got all the way to the end where I was saying, like, look, I can almost do all this with you. I'm not crazy about attending because, like Flip says, I find it boring. I think it would be interesting if people talked like they do on the internet about the stuff now, but they don't at church. It's boring at church. But I got all the way around, but I can't march in there and say I believe. And you want to get married in the temple. And I'm not going to go say that to go get married in the temple. I'm not going to do that. And that's where it all hinged on that. And so obviously I wasn't allowed like that level. If I was just being honest, like I could almost go all the way with you guys, but I just can't announce the belief system and still out.
That's funny because I got
were to
excommunicated solely because because a lot of people were like, basically like, why didn't you plead the fifth? But like my attitude is like, no, I
can't plead the fifth to God.
I made a promise. I agreed to the rules, and the rules say that I got to go through the disciplinary process, and that came out with me being excommunicated. And it's funny because there were so many, like, there were more ex-Mormons that were like, why'd you do that? The Mormons,
Yeah.
and for me, I was always confused. Like, what do you mean, why? Like, I made a promise. Like, these are the rules. Raised my hand to the square. I said I agree to the rules. And then when I broke the rules, I submitted myself for discipline. And that's things like all I had to do was keep my mouth shut. Just, I had a right to remain silent, right? And I could have done that and just stayed Mormon. But for me, it was never an option. Just personally, it didn't make sense to me. But it was funny how many Mormons, and especially ex-Mormons, were confused that I didn't just lie, basically, and just carry on in my membership.
So I use it. A good analogy for this is I was at BYU Idaho, and I would rail against the honor code all the time because the fucking the beard rule, there's a million stupid no flip flops, no shorts, no, and even when you're even when you're wearing shorts to go to the gym, they expect you to wear like warm up pants is what they call them on the way over your shorts, take them off and then put them back on when you're leaving. But it's a bunch of really stupid things. And I railed against them and talked about how stupid they are. And everybody would tell me that like, you agreed to this. So why are you bitching? And so now I've come around to that to some degree. And I'll tell them like, yeah, I did agree to it. And that's the thing. Don't bitch about rules you agree to. But I still don't like the BYU Idaho honor code. And part of that is because I just tell them like, it's not a good idea for like, it's not good for the church to do that for their own mission, right? It's detrimental to their membership to treat them like kids well into their 20s. Like you want them to get married, but you treat them like a fucking child that can't be trusted, that is going to fuck anything he sees. Like you have to be a little bit risky. You guys are just completely risk averse. And I'm kind of starting to come around to the idea that maybe risk aversion is like the worst thing that, like the worst personality trait you can have and live a fulfilled life.
Yeah, risk aversion and wokeness might as well be the same thing in the end of what the final result of that is.
Risk aversion is what brings wokeness to the mainstream.
Yeah.
Before
Charles
Wagner
Wagner says, "Oh, go ahead."
well, read Charles Wagner's because it's up on
Says,
the
I
screen.
recently started attending again. My wife is still a believer, and I just tell people that I don't believe, but I enjoy engaging with the ideas, and I miss being around people who share my values.
And how much shit do you catch from that? How much pressure? Are the home
Yeah,
teachers there every week?
Let's be honest though. I think that's probably easier today than it might have been in like '95.
Oh yeah,
Probably,
for sure.
yeah. That's also like I think I remember Charles being really, really angry at the church a while ago. So that's a kind of a big deal because I wouldn't have made that switch that quickly. So that's pretty awesome because I remember going when my wife still believed, trying to go and like, I'm going to go and I'm going to find shit to be angry about. And I'm going to be a dick to I'm going to, with facts and logic, pwn the Mormons.
Because like this Chris comment, because like how homeless is now a person experiencing homelessness. Like is ex-Mormon
Or
a person
houseless.
experiencing no Holy Spirit? That's what I am. I'm a person experiencing no blessings.
It's also excruciatingly boring with them. I also wonder because I left before cell phones were really good. But I think maybe you get judged if you use them. But like half of me like imagines like I could get through it with my cell phone pretty good.
I'm okay with being judged. I'm to the point where I don't.
I've got 85% of sacrament meeting for me was just looking at the hymnal and going to the back and looking at all the meters and going into all the technical stuff and just kind of zoning out on the music. And not thinking about what anybody was saying.
Last time I really attended, I was still young enough-ish to mess with my siblings. And you can ask my parents, my whole entire life was I might as well have been Johnny Knoxville with my siblings in the seats.
Let's start a ward where, because you know how there's usually the missionaries are in the foyer to greet investigators. Just assign a couple of ward members just to hand out Ziploc baggies of Cheerios to everybody. To everybody. That would make church better.
Zero shit caught so far, Sir Charles. It's worth noting that I had a very bad experience with some of the people when I first left. Oh yeah, no, there's that. I didn't have bad experience with anybody, but I was able to kind of sneakily.
I wanted to have bad experiences with people because I wanted to be like,
you wanted war stories.
Yeah, I'm looking for because I remember the first time it was after a couple of years of being out of the church. We moved into this new house and the bishop called and said, "Can I meet with you?" And I said, "Sure." Yeah. And I knew he was going to give me a calling, and he was going to give my wife a calling. They had always given us nursery callings, which we fucking hated. She was still in at the time. I wasn't. And so I was like, yeah, he's going to try to sway me back into the church, and I am not going to do it. And I get there, and I tell him, look, I'm not into this, but my wife is. So I'm not going to accept any calling you give me. And I would really love for you to not give her a nursery calling because she's tired of it. And he said, okay. And I was like, fuck you, man.
How dare you?
Tell me to pray about it or something. I want to pwn this with my new atheist knowledge that I know. But the funny part was, like, I remember attending church one day, and like this bishop was exceptional. He's just a really, really fucking good guy. I remember attending Elders Quorum, and he's talking about this missionary that had to come home early. And I think it was for like anxiety or whatever it was. I don't know. And he was explaining that in Elders Quorum. He said, this elder is coming home early. And he said in kind of like a really stern tone, he's like, and I know you guys will treat him well. Like he was really like protective of this kid that came home early from his mission. I was like, okay, like I'm pretty pissed off at the church, and I'm like, I'm borderline anti-theist at this, but that was a cool thing you just did.
Yeah. Like I say, like the meanest thing that happened to me as an excommunicated member was that the new bishop cut off my free charity that the old bishop was giving me out of pure charity and nothing else, to which I have no complaints about, because like, I got excommunicated, and then I went through my nightmare divorce, and my bishop, because like he wasn't even my bishop. I wasn't a member. I was excommunicated. I was out. But he's like, if you want therapy, I'll pay for it. And he sent me to a therapist that was not LDS Family Services. I don't even know what they're called now. Because that's right, they cut that whole thing off, didn't they? Anyway, like he sent me to a private therapist, and he paid for it out of the ward fund for like 18 months.
Wow.
And then he changed, like he left, and they brought a new bishop in, and the new bishop was like, "Hey, you got to come to church if you want this." And I said, "You know what? I'm not coming to church. I'll work at the cannery. I'll mow your lawns. I'll wash your toilets. I'll do service, but I'm not coming to church." And he said, "Well, then we're cutting off your therapy." And I said, "Okay." And I was 0% bitter about that because it was pure charity, and I'm grateful for the charity that I was given as an ex-Mormon, you know.
Well, when
and that I can say
most
is
people
the
don't do
worst thing
that.
that happened to me as an ex-Mormon, which was nothing.
Most people
there
don't do
you
that.
go.
So most people have this thing where if you just went out to a dude and you handed him $100 bill, he'd be like, "Oh, wow, that's amazing." He'd be so fucking grateful. And if you did it the next day, he would be fucking grateful again. And you do it every single day for a month. Eventually, he gets less and less and less grateful. And then you stop doing it, he's gonna be fucking mad at you. He'd be like, "Why?" And he's gonna make an anti-flip Reddit. and they're gonna talk about, they're gonna make a podcast about how what a dick Flip is because he has this $100 to give, but he doesn't give it freely. He only gave it freely for a month or whatever.
So there's this quote, like the meanest thing that ever happened to me is that girl wouldn't marry me because I wouldn't be Mormon, but also she wouldn't get off the pot. She wouldn't break up with me either. She's like, she was sure that I would just convert if she stayed around and gave me doe eyes long enough. And let me give you this quote from Arrested Development of what the tragedy of all that was. It says, "I'm dating this Christian girl right now. She wants me to be honest and reconnect with my son. And I'm just trying to get her to renounce God and fuck me. I just want to prove to her that I'm worth it."
I fucking love that show. Well, the first 3 seasons of that show. That was it's even funnier with context because that's a girl that he stole from his nephew.
Yeah. No, there's so much incest in this
you have a recording of "Please Jesus" you can put on the.
Oh yeah,
right?
I actually wrote a song called "Please Jesus Look Away." So,
Please Jesus Look Away,
and it got played on the local radio. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. And she played it for her mom. "Look, he wrote this for me. Isn't this so sweet?"
I didn't know that part.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, that's great. That's a great song. Oh, very nice.
Oh, girl braids.
The whole, yeah.
That's 30%. That's one thing I've noticed. Like 30% of classic Star Trek is talking to the alien, but this is a human female. They are different from human men. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, God.
Yeah, that's the stuff. Anyway, we got 4 freaking episodes to pump through. So now instead of listening to clips, I'm just gonna data dump them, and maybe we'll find 1 or 2 clips from each. How many times do you think they mentioned deconstruction?
Oh Christ! No, I watched
48.
It. That's why I
look it up. What's the
stopped.
bet? Wait, what's the bet?
Oh my God! I
Price
even
is
know
right. 48.
I don't know how to quantify it. How many?
Lower,
how many
just for like an
hours?
actual bet. I'll
2
put
hours?
20.
Is it
2
2
hours.
hours?
I'm gonna go with 20.
It's well above 20.
Control
Okay, maybe
F.
not well above. I'm gonna go with 35, and I think that might be
29.
29.
35 is the
Who got
lower
that?
end of what I'm thinking it might actually be.
So wait, it's 2 hours and 7 minutes with 29.
Wait, so
what
I
is that,
said 20. Flip said 40. You said 35. If
Yeah,
we're
I
not
said
going
35.
over as bad, you win. You got
So
it.
wait,
close to
100
this.
I was going lower than I thought, honestly. Only 29, huh?
So that's 127 minutes.
I think it was all front loaded because I
So
heard the term
every
deconstruction.
4.5 minutes, roughly.
So funny story. Christopher from Before the Crow's Nest told me that Troy and him were commenting on the word deconstruct on this and Derrida, and he says that he thinks that their comments on the live stream got deleted for them talking about it and saying stuff about the word deconstruction. Ooh. Anyway, so one of the things that drives me nuts, a couple of the contradictions, maybe instead of like listening to the clips, just take my word for them. But one of the things they say is like, you got to have philosophy that's better than these Bronze Age old patriarchal idiots, right? But then in the other breath, they'll say, in ancient times, every tribe had a shaman. And that's how those tribes were so good and great together. And it's this problem of modernity. So there's this thing of like the ancient people were bad and good, at the same time because they are ancient. they got stuff better, and they also got stuff worse, and that's just a truth. Where to go? They say they're not into woo, but Kara's definition of atheism is just that I just don't give all my love to one God.
Yeah, that's.
I don't worship a single solitary God. That's what my atheism means.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's not atheism.
That's not what that word means, and that's okay.
It's not what deconstruction means. I mean, I don't think anything means what it means anymore. But they say we're all interconnected because they talk about some of their spiritual experiences as Mormons. Like Bill thought of praying for a family in the middle of the night. It turned out that they went through something. And Kara talked about some other people sensing stuff from her. And so they started talking about this wooey stuff, that we're all interconnected. And Sam from Zelf chimed in and said, we're all interconnected in this, platonic oneness sense way. And so they kind of totally get, Bill says he's a mystic again. And they say, oh, we're all interconnected with this oneness, but we're atheists. But there's this oneness, transcendent, ultimate energy of the universe pushing towards a final historicism type end goal of a super united final state. And we're all eternal beings of the universe understanding each other, but I'm hard atheist. Not woo. No, not into woo. No woo. They mentioned that.
Really, though?
They say there's truths that Bill could understand, but Jacob just couldn't grasp.
Yeah, I heard. I do remember her saying that. Maybe I
Should we
watched
listen
more
to
of this than I
that?
thought. Yeah, do it. Fuck.
I didn't watch any of this. I should have. Too busy watching classic Trek. You know, one thing that really strikes me about watching classic Trek is I didn't realize, because I'm watching it on a streaming service, right? So it's HD transfers from the original film, and they shot that on high quality film, because when I was a kid, I didn't notice how brown Leonard Nimoy's teeth were, but he was a legendary chain smoker. His teeth are brown. But and also on the transfer, on the close-ups of the women, even with the soft focus, you can see their acne poking out under their foundation. It's really striking. And it's funny because I was talking with my boss at work.
You
and we're
probably didn't have to do makeup quite as well back then because the
Well,
camera's not going to
amazing.
pick it up.
Yeah,
shows shot in the
deconstruction stuff
80s
was
look
deleted.
worse than Star Trek because in the 80s they were shot on video and it's not holding up. Whereas Star Trek was shot on high-quality film stock and it looks good. Anyway, that's just TV movie shit.
Bill Real is just so smart. You don't understand him. I know we don't. We don't understand anything.
They're going to online IQ.
We think words mean
140.
things and they don't. They mean other things, but we can't even really understand them. But we just haven't deconstructed our patriarchy. Let's see. Transcend. That's one of the things Jacob still needs to do. He doesn't realize he has some more deconstructing to get further to the better goal of objective truth. Non-objective truth, subjective, Bill Real, proper, transhumanist, post-liberal, neutral, better truth. Transcendent is okay as long as it doesn't hold you accountable. Let's see here. Let's see what they say about Jacob.
Science gets further and further in what we can know that we're all going to have to reframe some of our ideas.
Wow. No, that's a deepity.
If you want to bring up the Jacob Hansen little debate that you had last week, I recommend everyone go watch it. It was the most fascinating thing I've seen in this post-Mormon realm in a long time. Bill Reel discussing with Mormon apologist, Mormon podcaster. And you guys really hit on the subject of truth a lot and your frameworks for truth and what we know. I think you guys were never, you understood what he was talking about. I think it was almost impossible for him to kind of understand what you're talking about. And so I think we have to get out of these black and white fallacious ideas that the ways that we can know truth have to be coming from this Mormon Iron Age philosophies about the Bible. If the Bible is true, Jesus Christ is the literal God, and that means that Mormonism and these people speak for God. And for me personally, it's this outsourcing of authority and autonomy to something else. And as I've grown in the last 4 years since leaving the church, the thing that hurts the most is just that like whatever you want to believe about spirituality, it's that Thoreau quote about if you are trying to seek God and you meet a servant, ask for God himself, something like that, if you know that quote. And just this idea that the ways that we want to be able to find out where our place is in the world and how we interact with this environment, so much of it is just like, blop, all of those neural pathways, all of that spirituality is quite outsourced to something else. And
she's
then
still
we're told how
talking,
to operate within it. Then getting these warm feelings, this elevated emotion that will then double down that our authority should be outsourced, you know, just that mode is honestly, I think it's frightening, but I think in Jacob Hansen's view, he brings up Hitler, you know, he's like, well, if you trust your inner authority, look at Hitler, you know? So I don't know if you wanted to discuss that anymore, because I think taking back your intuition, just the same way that Jacob Hansen was saying, like, well, of course, within the framework of Mormonism, yeah, there's going to be people who speak and say wrong things, and that's where you have your intuition to know what's right or wrong. And Bill, you made the excellent point in that podcast about like, okay, well, that's just what I'm doing now. It's like, I looked in Mormonism, I thought I could figure this out better than these men who give me so many wrong answers that I know are demonstrably false. And so now, just on the other side of that, I'm also just in this pursuit for truth. So how do you pursue, what do you view as true? How do you view that now? I feel like that is the buzzword of all buzzwords, that you almost have to feel like I have to define how I find truth, you know, where yeah, I'm ranting, but did that question make sense?
Yeah. So Jacob Hansen, I would consider very intelligent. I would consider him articulate. He's a believer, faithful, active believer. He's the last kid in his family who is active in the church. All of his siblings have encountered some sort of faith crisis or difficulty believing and have deconstructed and stepped away. In these conversations, we've had 2 of them so far. We'll have a third on this Friday. The first
You deconstructed Forrest?
Yeah, you deconstructed.
Forrest is all deconstructed, man. I didn't know we were talking.
Forrest is requesting that we shit
one
more
them
on
deconstructed.
Forrest is requesting that we shit more on Jacob. And he said he was preaching morality while believing in a murdering God. I guess I don't know what you're referring to.
Troy says he found the deconstruction comments. That was fake news. Although I tried to look for him but I guess I just couldn't find him.
So one of the things I actually wanted to ask Jacob recently is that he posted in Thoughtful Saints, reject deontology. And what the fuck are you talking about? Like, aren't you religious? What would that mean for a Mormon person to, and I would say the only real rejection, I'm a more deontological thinker, but I'd say like the closest I come to rejecting it is saying that I think when the stakes are really, really, really fucking high, or like I don't have a solid deontological rule, then yeah, maybe I'll revert to utilitarianism in a way. But like I stray hard from any utilitarian. That's why I freak out with these cause harm arguments, is because they reek of utilitarianism to me, and utilitarianism, when it's described to me, always sounds like evil almost.
So to me, I mean, as Flip always just says, is like when people just kind of go to faith, you know, I just kind of go, well, at least, you know, you're kind of grounded. But we all know what the answer to that is that we think that thing's not there. You do think that it is there, but we already know. We know what your ground is. You've described it. What I appreciate, what Jacob is doing, is one of the things that I've been wanting and trying to do and poke out of that whole ex-Mormon community for quite a while, at least the big famous ones, is that their neutral ain't neutral, that their supposed like a hard sciencey, hard truthiness, whatever, is all full of stuff that to me just doesn't. I'll put it on the same ground as Mormon faith claims. Like, I don't think they're doing better. You know, I don't think at all that they are. And if there is such a thing as better, I think you have to go all the way with what Jacob says about the post-modern thing, is that if it is all just subjective, the best you can do is we're the same. And I don't really buy that your cause harm claims, that you guys are going to win the cause harm claims, especially give it another 20, 30 years. Like, you're going to cause the harm. If you get just as big as that church, you're going to cause the same amount of harm, even in little ways, like with sexual abuse, like we said, if you organize in any sorts of way. But I also think you guys are probably going to kill half the planet with your autistic ways of thinking and you know, all the net zero bull crap that Harari and those types of guys think. But that's the extreme end of it. The other flip end of it is that it's weird and circular. They just kind of constantly say stuff that, you know, the past is bad, the past is good. There is no subjective truth, but we're going to get better, and everything's going towards better. This historicist claim, we're going towards something better. Like, I fully reject that. Like, I've recommended Mary Harrington's book, which is Feminism Against Progress. What she says, what she's against progress is that she's not saying like I'm against or think that, you know, you can't progress like make a cell phone better or something like that. But what she's saying is you're lying to yourselves that we're flourishing more with these things. There's only trade-offs. There's only trade-offs. And you guys, there's this idea that, you know, the long arc of history leads towards this Hegelian super state final thing that's better. No, I believe far more in who was it, Benson or Kimball, who said the cycle of pride. You know, I believe, and that's, you know, I frequently point to Spengler because you guys bring up the Fowler stages of faith. And we had a discussion this week on one of the Facebook pages, but those stages of faith assume, and he talks about it here, assume you're going towards something better. You're going towards something more rational. You're going towards Star Trek. And if you're going to say the future ain't Star Trek, the future's Dune. The future is like, or it could be either, you know, but the way idiots seem to be pushing it is towards the Dune end of stuff. And the idea is that the Spenglerian idea is Spengler points to like those advancements to more rationality is a type of entropy, not a type of progress. That's like if you look at the civilization as a human going towards those more philosophical, more wise, more religious stages, those are the death throes of that religion. That's the rat utopia. That place on the face of collapse. That's where
I think about the rat utopia every single day. So okay, he asked if Jacob is any better than Bill in this, and like this isn't so much me shitting on. Okay, I'm kind of shitting on Bill, but I guess what I would say to that is, and I don't believe the same things as Jacob does. I don't think that Mormonism is true or real or anything like that. But like the thing I said to the group chat when we were talking about this is when person A says morality is objective, and I found that, and I found that on an admittedly unjustifiable axiom, and person B says morality isn't objective, but slavery is objectively wrong, so it sort of is objective, but I'm definitely not founding that on any unjustifiable axiom other than my own senses and rationality, then person A doesn't really have anything else to say. Because like Jacob at least admits that like once you say that like, well, God is my axiom, you're at least admitting to something unjustifiable. And Real is really, really trying to tread this Izot gap, which is trying to claim that you're not believing in anything unjustifiable. And I don't, and they're contradictory too, is the thing. When you say that morality is subjective, but slavery is objectively wrong, you're contradicting yourself.
Yeah.
You're just outright contradicting yourself. And actually, slavery is the example I always use when I'm saying, because I tell people, no, I think morality is objective, and I understand. I think that's probably an axiom that I have. That is an unjustifiable axiom, and I'm very comfortable making it. I'm not comfortable making a bunch of unjustifiable leaps. But with slavery specifically, that's the example I always use, and I say, I think slavery is always wrong, and will always be wrong. No matter, like, there could be 100 people left on the earth, and if all 100 of them think that slavery is correct, I think they're all wrong. And I understand.
Yeah.
I'm not justifying that based on any belief system, and neither like or based on anything other than a sort of a leap to a belief system. And that's
so
why I side more with Jacob on this.
But that also gets in the point, which they got into some of their debates, is that tribalism doesn't come from nowhere. Tribalism comes from evolutionary gene. It's the same stuff. Tribalism doesn't come from idiots being idiots and some idiot decided a God thing and I'm going to dupe all these people. Tribalism came from the same selfish gene.
Yeah.
You know, and
kin selection. That's the chapter in Selfish Gene that covers all this, is called kin selection.
He talks about that a lot. So the kin selection, it's the R score, right? That's what that is.
Basically, like, because it's all like, because if you consider it as individual genes, because the idea is that like you share half of your genes with your siblings, your children, and your parents. So if sacrificing yourself saves 3 individuals that are one
that have an R score
removed,
that's greater than
then there's a 50% bonus in your genes propagating by sacrificing yourself for 3 people that share half of your genes, you know? And you can, you can do this thing mathematically into cousins and great nephews and all that other shit.
I brought it up before. You're not, everybody gets all in their high minds. Like Kara says in this very episode, everybody does like a shift to the left whenever we leave this, because we realize it needs to be more about love and about openness and let the new people in. Okay, well, let's go to a time in history where in the United States, letting a bunch of new people in turned into what's now being called a genocide, although I think a genocide should be intentional. The Native Americans let in a bunch of Europeans and they all died from disease. Like that's what tribalism comes from. Like tribalism is a gene response to having understood that stuff happening many times through history. And
to bring it up again, like we've mentioned before, the North Sentinelese. There's there's like 50 to 250 people living on in an uncontacted tribe in an island in the Indian Ocean, and all of the local governments have laws against people going to bother them, specifically because of disease. Meanwhile, God only knows the moral nightmare that people live under in that tribe. I guarantee there's rape. I guarantee there's incest. I guarantee there's murder. I'm sure they have a wacky religion.
Yeah,
you know, but
I remember when that missionary
we got that
went
prime
there,
directive attitude toward them of non-interference. Okay.
I remember when that Christian missionary went there and got killed, and you're like, well, okay, yeah, like stupid games, stupid prizes, or whatever. But everybody was mad at him. They're like, yeah, he's gonna kill that whole tribe of people or whatever. I was like, I don't like. That's bad. Like, I think he shouldn't have done the thing he did. But like, what do you think happens there? They just killed a guy for walking onto their fucking island and saying, "Here, want to learn about Jesus?"
So this is one of the points that like Brett Weinstein says, there's something in evolution to offend all of us. And that's just what the truth of it is that if you really kind of start saying, okay, we're going to base it in evolution, which is kind of what Hume tends to do, or the new pragmatist that is kind of going off of like trial and error of stuff over time and by their fruits, noticing on and you know, they decry the tribalism of all this sort of stuff, even though you always end up being tribal again anyway, because these guys talk about loving all, but I'm sure that they don't love January 6th protesters, even though if you make them stop and say, well, okay, yeah, I do. But only after you snap your fingers out and say, hey, you realize you're being a hypocrite here or something like that. But the tribal gene, the tribalism ain't going away. It's in you as much as the eating thing is in you. And you can let stuff, you can let people in, you can start opening borders, you can start doing all that stuff, but you can get ChatGPT to tell you should do this, you should do that. Oh, wow, it's lovey-dovey, super lovey future. Collapse, societal collapse. That stuff is around the corner from some of those suggestions that seem all lovey. And I'm not saying it's specifically that one or anything. I'm just saying there's all sorts of galaxy-brained ideas of future lovey liberal sorts of ideas. And you said, what about Steven Pinker's line going up? People, that's where the line go up joke comes from, is they point at different, you know, it comes from both sides of a critique of capitalism, but there's a lot of stuff where they think just because your GDP goes up or something like that, that means flourishing goes up or something like that. There's other things besides line go up, you know, and some of those things are also things that are going to maybe run other things off a cliff. And you know, it's a little complicated, but the whole idea is like, I'm not saying that this side is 100% true. There's a yin yang, you know, there's absolutely a yin on that side, but it seems in the ex-Mormon community, it all goes super yin. Like, oh, we're now neutral science, neutral observers of the universe, and we're atheist people who believe in the transcendence of all humans, and we're all going to reunite with oneness of the universe once all the humans come together in a Coca-Cola commercial holding hands.
So I think Forrest here is hitting on a thing that I was trying to hit on earlier. He's saying, I don't know anyone that says evolution is a basis for right and wrong. They are saying that it is the origin of our emotions and that we use to justify right and wrong. And that, to me, sounds like a good summation of the selfish gene, like we were talking about before. And that's why, it's kind of why I said, that's a good explanation for why I said that I don't think it would really change much in the Jacob Hansen and Bill Reel debate if they read it, because it's just describing the is. It's not describing the ought.
No, but that's
they're trying to describe the ought.
So Bill brought on the philosophical expert in what's his name, Charles Spencer or something like that. Troy was listening to him, and he did base that in that, and it is one of the bases. Like I said, it's the basis of the new pragmatists. They are pointing at that as something that you can use to say there are better paths towards surviving and thriving and that sort of stuff. So they are, when you're trying to rank, the new pragmatists say, yes, there's many options, but you can rank them and rank them based off of evolutionary concepts, which is survival and or thrival. But that stuff's always double-edged sword, because like the Malthusians say, being super successful and getting too many people can also run you right off an edge off the other direction too. But not that they've been right, but they could be right if that were true, that like we got so many people, we just killed all of ourselves. But there's problems with line go up. It's not always the answer. There's plenty of things we can say, well, our GDP went up, so stuff's better. There's all sorts of problems in those types of issues, but it is one of the groundings, and people will call it a fallacy. Like I said, John Larson calls it a fallacy to say, by their fruits you shall know. No, that's a hard level thing in some philosophical concepts of how they go about trying to base some of their stuff in hard world truths. And Charles Spencer, Bill Reel had him on this week to come out and say, well, Jacob was right in a lot of ways. Jacob was right that you can't use the house to refer to the house, which I've kind of tried to point to Quine. The Quine gets into how most philosophical justifications are themselves as circular as the Bible is. They almost all are. And that's what you have to, realize. But one of the things they can point to on the outside is survival and thrival. So it is pointing to the is of what survives and what lives and what moves on, which is one of the big things that Peterson and Harris were going on and on and on about forever. What are some of the other stuff that they say here? They say,
So Blue Meanie asked if we got to the part where Bill refers to himself in the third person. I'm not sure what he's talking about.
He says Bill Reel gets it right on social issues before Mormonism does. And I called bullshit on that, partially because he left Mormonism in 2014. So like, what major social issues did the church not come around on that he got to first there? Transgender kids?
So he mentions...
So he got the transgender kids first or something?
Yeah, Bill Reel was pro sterilizing children before the church was. Good job, buddy. No, but he's talking about black people in the priesthood, and but the thing was, he joined as a teenager. Wasn't that already done?
Yeah.
I don't understand why he thinks that is an example of him beating the church to the punch.
Yeah, so these guys are saying, and there's critiques of the idea of evolution just being the only answer. But what I'm saying is that's what Charles Spencer and those different philosophers have tried to say.
I would say
we have more of a basis in something outside of referring to our own philosophy. And almost all other philosophy, analytic philosophy, according to Quine, just refers back to itself. It bases itself in itself as much as the Bible does. The only thing that bases itself on something outside, although it's just kind of a starting point, is the ones who try to point at evolutionary success.
And I would also say that the selfish gene doesn't describe why the is. It tries to describe why the ought is.
Yeah, there isn't whys. There ain't no whys, man.
No, Christopher Rice says evolution is modern doctrine for atheism, but no, evolution and atheism have no contingency upon the other, none whatsoever. Both can exist entirely independently or together. There's
atheism,
no
atheism as like the actual word. Yeah, I think there's the disconnect is where you guys are a different generation of atheists. Because I understand what these people are saying when they are shitting on atheism, and I understand the ideal that no, atheism is just saying that I don't believe in God. It's the absence of belief. It's unfortunately kind of turning into this thing that
it's more
isn't
they do
not
atheism
just
plus.
Describing a lack of belief.
Yeah.
It's describing an entire belief system, and that's what they're referring to.
Well, Shermer got into that and finally explained to it, like I've been trying to yell at Mormon stories for years, who are just like, oh, what happened to that atheism movement? It was so nice. Shermer actually got a chance to explain to him a bit that it fell apart. He called two different movements. He said the first movement was a fight between how extreme of an atheist you are or not. So there was a bunch of people saying, no, you got to be a super militant atheist, and the rest saying, no, you can be a chill atheist. And then
No,
later
gotta
it
take,
turned
I'm saying you gotta take it back. Like I
No,
want
no, it ain't happening. They own it, man.
Flip's
Yeah.
definition. I want that to be what people perceive atheism as, but it's
Yeah, like
I
'cause
don't
for me,
know that it is right now.
the only atheist activism that ever made any sense or still makes any sense to me is strictly about upholding the separation clause. That's the only atheist axe there is to grind in American
Sure.
society, is upholding the separation clause. That's it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I want that to be what it is. It's just not.
And I can't complain because my thing's hard, but the deal is, well, no, I agree with you that the atheism stuff's been overrun by I mean, we can just go to that normalizing atheism channel right now and just scroll through every single post and be like, what? Like every single post will be bullshit.
It's kind of like with punk. Punk has been ruined, and it's been ruined for the longest time. But punk is one of those things that sort of eats itself anyway. But like people telling me I can't be punk for whatever reason, and like hipsters think that they're punk. It's the funniest shit ever to watch. I remember watching this hipster girl tell my friend that, like, wait, are you wearing that John Deere hat ironically? And that's all you can do when you're punk. But like, I don't think. I don't know. Go on with what you're saying.
This episode right here is where he brought in this guy after talking with Jacob and realizing that he'd kind of gotten a little bit circular or lost, or what he does is say, I don't believe in any sort of, like you said, I don't believe in objective morality. It's just better to believe in this, like in the very next sentence, like 50 different times, which is also something he does with the Kara's, all the time, is in that it doesn't make any sense. But this guy tried to bring into him talking about naturalistic philosophy. I've pointed to it before, but if you want like a deeper dive into it, go to King Crocoduck.
Okay, wait. This is what I mean, Forrest. This is what I mean when I'm saying that I want this definition of atheism to be the real thing. Like I want the whole, like, atheism is just a rejection of mysticism, basically, or God. But right here, you're saying that you got banned from every atheist subreddit because you dared question third trimester abortion. That's dogma. Like that's you getting kicked out for questioning the doctrine.
So
that
this
shouldn't
guy
be an atheist issue. It shouldn't be, and based on the definition that you and Flip are talking about, like, it isn't. I don't blame you for not wanting to give up on it, though. I get it.
So this stuff this guy here, these 4 episodes, is kind of like a fast, quick dive into some of those philosophers about the naturalistic philosophy of how stuff's, talking about how these sorts of things can start happening before philosophy, before epistemology. It kind of shows it right there. Like the guy Charles Spencer with Bill Real also talked about it. They start with amoeba. Amoeba run away from pain, run toward food. This guy points to it with slime molds, and those things don't have like brains and myth that's guiding them around and that sort of stuff. And then, it's kind of like the gene level idea, but moving up to the next organism from there, and then talking about how stuff kind of starts from there, and that leads to all sorts of things that we then go creating memes and mythology and all that sorts around. That's the claims of this stuff. But a lot of the people behind it, William James and those guys who have answered the postmodernists 50 years before the other people, they also were the ones who got into the new pragmatism, who noticed that the religious people, even under this, and it's one of the things that I said to the Charles Spencer, I say it in the comments to them, is like, under your philosophy, Jacob's morality can win. Jacob's morality is doing better, or can do better, or survive more, or not kill us all. That's kind of one of the ideas. Or make a community that survives and thrives better, or has more children, or as Zizek says, still has eroticism because of the myth that we are able to say to each other.
Okay, so I guess I'm coming to this, listening to Forrest talk about the whole atheism thing. It's getting to me because I'm like, okay, I get the whole not wanting to give up on the atheism label, and I don't think that you should. Kind of in the same way that I don't really give up on the ex-Mormon label, because, like, yeah, I consider myself ex-Mormon, even though, like, it might come with a bunch of stigma because of how insufferable a lot of the ex-Mormon community is. I believe in labels as being purely descriptive, and so maybe I'm being a little bit blind on the whole atheist thing. I want atheists to be purely descriptive. I don't want it to be a prescription of what
let's do it.
stupid
Let's
things
do it
that people
live,
believe.
right?
I don't want it's the same way that I don't want ex-Mormonism to be all ex-Mormonism is to me. That's why I don't reject the label, is because it just means that you used to believe in Mormonism. That's all it means.
I'm gonna do it. We'll do it live here. I'll go just through a couple posts through this dumb freaking Facebook page called "Normalizing Atheism."
Okay, anything that says normalizing, like, just to reject that shit immediately.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, this is the one I actually commented off. An atheist believes that a hospital should be built instead of a church.
Oh, shut the
An
fuck up.
atheist believes that a deed must be done instead of a prayer said. An atheist strives.
What
for
about an atheist capitalist? Huh? What about
involvement in
because an
life.
atheist capitalist will tell you that no, whatever the person with the capital wants to build should be built.
Life and not escape into death? He wants disease conquered, poverty banished, war eliminated. And quote by somebody, I don't know what.
What?
And here's every single person. Excellent. Where? Oh my gosh, this is my belief too.
I
That's
also
one
gotta
commented.
point out that's written on a fucking stone tablet, and that's hilarious.
Yeah.
They don't see the irony.
No, the irony there.
Science has done more for humanity in the last 100 years than all world religions in the past 5,000 years. Like what? The nuclear bomb? Like that's one of the points that Mary Harrington says is like it's just trade-offs. It's just trade-offs.
Yeah.
Like the
You know
has
what-
done more. What are you talking about? Yeah, we got.
You know what
iPhones.
science has done in the last 3 years? COVID.
We got iPhones. We got good stuff on it, but there's
We got
trade-offs.
COVID.
Yeah.
We got COVID from science.
And that's one of the points that postmodernists make, that is maybe one of their better points, is that wait a minute, is all this mechanized new futuristic stuff better? Are our communities better? Like,
Yeah.
done more? What do you mean done more? I mean, you just hear all these words, and that's the stuff that you hear Bill and Kara and John DeLynn fall back into, and they all have these priors of this blue church priors that
It's like if you're a bushman in Africa, you have 0% chance of experiencing a carjacking. It's just not going to happen to you because the technology doesn't exist for you to have that happen to you.
I'll pull it up on another page, but I saw this thing in philosophy that says like me watching a documentary about lions when they catch a deer, and it shows like a guy smiling, wow, and the documentary is about lions. Me watching the documentary about lions when they catch a deer, and the documentary is about deer, and it shows the guy crying. So it's like, what the documentary is about lions. If the lion catches the deer, you're like, yes. And the documentary is about deer. You watch the same thing. Oh no! You know.
I like this Christopher Rice comment. I tried to meet with my local free thinkers club. They don't seem open to theists.
I know. That's what I told him. I was like, if you're a theist, good luck finding it. Like, if you're a theist, but not like a mainstream conservative, I mean, but not like a mainstream Christian, then good luck finding a group. Like, I find myself in the exact same spot. Like, good luck finding a group. I went to my favorite coffee shop is connected to this Christian church. And I see the people come there and do Bible study. I'm like, that seems nice. That just seems pleasant, you know? I get in with a group of people and studying morality, and then I hear them, like I hear them talk, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. That sounds stupid. And so, yeah, he says homeless in many ways. It's Jonathan Streeter described it the best. It's the proudest I've ever been of a label that anybody's ever given me, and it was when he was doing his little apostate insult dog thing, and he just told me, he's like, an apostate no matter where you go, and I was like, fuck yeah.
Please explain to me why deeply held religious beliefs are more important than thoroughly understood facts. Aren't oughts, Phyllis. Jesus is coming on your mom's tits. You got him.
It's just kind of a funny dick move, I guess.
Yeah. Let's see. Why do people believe in God? Unfortunately, humans are unfortunately, like you've already put a big word on there that judges it, right? Humans
then
are
also,
wired.
are they? Like
Yeah.
maybe.
Unfortunately, humans are wired to believe in God. Evolution has programmed us. Like that's the other stuff. Kara says that I am programmed to this. The universe wants me to do this. She says that all the time too. The universe
Okay,
wants me
we're
to-
also talking. We're
Yeah,
also
yeah,
talking
like,
about
again, if you read the
atheists
selfish-
who have clearly not read the selfish gene.
Yeah, the
will
selfish
tell
gene
you
tells
that,
us
no,
that no,
you're not
evolution
programmed
programs
to
us to
avoid-
sacrifice ourselves. That's what we're programmed to do.
has programmed me to avoid death. Like evolution is like a being that's, and that's one of the things that Bill will frequently conflate too. Like Flip started out saying, like evolution is just more survival. It does not mean better. It means survive. Like it doesn't mean it's not mechanizing you to become a god. It's
Snakes are not unevolved because they lost their limbs.
they're
hands and
evolved to be
feet.
alive right now the same we are. How that worked for them.
Like blind lizards are not less evolved because they devolved their eyes. It's just not how that works.
We believe in an afterlife because it is an attractive option that appears on the surface to continue our existence. For many, this belief helps them cope with the fear of death. Abolishing this belief requires one to be completely intellectually honest with oneself. It is not easy for people to admit that our consciousness ends with our death. And yet this adds value to our life and stresses the importance. Go to that transhuman episode and see
This is
how
true.
ready they
there's
are.
this idea that if I
This
tell
sounds like-
somebody.
You know it's true when you feel the spirit. That's what he's saying.
No, I know. There's this idea that if I tell somebody that ascribing to a certain belief system means that I am at one with nature or whatever, or I have reached nirvana or transcendence or whatever the fuck it is. Like all you have to do to get to that is to ascribe to this ideology. Then all I got to do is say I ascribe to this ideology and I have transcended. I ascribe to atheism, therefore I have transcended. I ascribe to Christianity, therefore I have transcended. And that's so much easier than actually transcending. And I don't know what the fuck transcending really is. I'm not saying that I'm there or that that's even a place you can get to, but that seems to be where they want to go and they want to shortcut their way there.
You have evidence to disprove evolution. Gather your data, get it peer reviewed, and collect your Nobel Prize. Word that it were so simple. Word that it were so simple. There's all this stuff about Dawkins. He like give like some sort of episode about how in the science schools somebody disproved some other guy thinking there was not a dry eye in the house and all this sorts of thing. And if you talk to anybody about how the science institutions actually work, like it'd be awesome if that were true. And I'm not saying that you have evidence to disprove evolution, but no, it would not be that easy. There would be people who would hold on to it dogmatically.
Well, I feel like I always feel like I have a very high standard for when I'm willing to say that I believe a thing, and tell an atheist group if they ask you like, do you even believe in evolution? Tell them I think so. I'm not sure I know enough about it. They will jump down your throat, or even climate change, any of that stuff. Say I'm not super informed on this. And really, the thing is, I don't have any reason to doubt evolution. All the stuff I've learned about it makes sense, but I have a very high standard of when I'll say, yeah, no, I actually believe this thing. And so whenever somebody asks me, do you believe that evolution is the way that things happen? I'll be like, I think so. I'm not positive on that, and I'm open to that being proven true. But even being open to that being proven untrue or falsifiable, even like that is, oh, Jesus dick.
Yeah, yeah. We should go to the Shermer episode and just zip through that because but these guys I see, I mean, this is just one day, but I see stuff on here all the time that does the plus. And it's just constantly plus. Like if you don't believe in God, you should accept what makes Christianity different from all other religions. Drag nuns in the outfield. Sister perpetual indulgent also invited to Angels Pride Night. Getting that atheism normalized there. But
we really, really, really want to be around kids. Like
so normal.
Okay. Like I don't think that drag is inherently sexual.
a lot of drag is sexual, but the fact that you really, really, really want to be around kids, you can't be shocked when that raises a bunch of eyebrows.
Yeah. Let's go see Michael Shermer.
Yeah, he didn't know as much about Joseph Smith's
Oh, that
transgressions as I did.
jerk.
So
You there? Did I lose everybody?
no, you're good.
Okay. My thing unplugged it in my ear. All right. I've got some notes. We'll go to the notes in the transcript. He starts out, he hits the drag thing pretty quick.
That was
John.
funny.
Let's see here. Let me see if I can find
He hits the trans women in sports, and he says, "It doesn't make sense. These are men." Like, he actually says that on Mormon Stories podcast. Oh, I laughed my ass off. I think they missed it because, well, part of it is that John Dehlin is so starstruck at this point that he's not going to struggle session Michael Shermer. You know?
Very much, yeah.
Like, because he clearly doesn't really hold to his stupid fucking beliefs the way that he says he does. he's got a transgender, non-binary daughter, I guess. I don't know what you call. I don't know the gender neutral term for child. I guess it is a transgender, gender neutral child, and he brings it up, and Michael Sherman's like, I don't want to use the pronouns and shit, and he's like, well, I'm starstruck enough that I'll just cuck to you. Which Michael Shermer's right, and you're wrong, but stand up for the things that you pretend to believe.
Let's see here. Starting out from. Oh, one thing that let me just say a couple of things. One thing that transhumanist guy is, he says atheists have no business being transhumanists because we're not that, you know. So he's like saying, if like you're like one of those legit, you know, like what Flip talks about, like this ain't for you, because he's admitting that no, we're getting in God and gaudy territory here for sure. Let's see here. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he loves it. Let's that's the first note I have. Let's see what it says. Can't remember what it. Control F. Tyson. Let's see what they say.
The moral arc, heavens on earth, and giving the devil his due, reflections of a scientific humanist. Follow him on Twitter at Michael Shermer. And of course, there's a Neil deGrasse Tyson quote here. Michael Shermer is a beacon of reason in an ocean of irrationality. Love it. Love Neil deGrasse Tyson. Mm-hmm. And I'll just say one of my personal heroes.
You know who else loves Neil deGrasse Tyson? The Nerdist. They've been around for 15 years loving Neil deGrasse Tyson. Just like Carrie Santa Maria loves Neil deGrasse Tyson too.
Neil deGrasse Tyson he should be the Nickelback of astrophysicists. Right? Is that great Archer quote where he's like, karate? You mean the Dane Cook of martial arts?
Well, so he had that whole thing recently about consensus science, and that he got into it with that NDT guy, you know, like, well, consensus science beats it, doesn't matter. And, you know, it's obviously absolutely the opposite of, you know, that whole thing about what was it, Copernicus and all that stuff that, you know, stuff that Einstein and everybody said through history that, you know, it doesn't matter what consensus is, what matters is what's true. Mm-hmm. And, he made this large argument that during the whole entire debacle of the pandemic, the consensus science was still the right choice, even if they were wrong. Let's see here. Next thing is he brings up the culture war.
It wasn't really until the late 90s, early 2000s that the kind of culture wars over science and religion really took off. And that's when I started writing more about it. And so I'm not, you know, I'm an atheist. I'm a skeptic. I don't think there is a God. I wouldn't put a 0 on it. You know, there's a, you know, in Bayesian reasoning, there's a category called Cromwell's rule that you never assign as Oliver Cromwell. He thinks that might be mistaken. That you never assign a 0 to anything. You know, the UFOs may be aliens. So, okay, I'll give it a 1. You know, 99% probably not aliens, but 1%. Okay. So it's.
From there, let's go to talking cult stuff.
Oh yeah, I want to see this.
Oh my gosh, so many word cult come up 46 times. What the heck?
What?
Hold on.
I guess you would have to have that, wouldn't you? Do you use
What?
that
The
Utah ID?
unemployment. Oh yeah, too.
I'm gonna say, because like I use that because I work for the state, but you just work with the state.
Damn, man.
What would we put God's existence at? 1 out of 5? I mean, if we have to do whole integers, 1. I don't know.
3. 3.5.
Transhumanist future god 1,000.
0 wasn't an option.
He's
1 to
coming.
5.
He's coming.
Out of
He's-
100.
He's breathing down our necks.
I
Let's see,
mean,
man.
I would say non-zero, like, you know, as
Yeah,
close to
non-zero
0
for
as
sure.
you can get without 0.
nah, I'd say if we're going out of 100, I'm gonna say like 80.
But the other thing is, like, because you get into this problem where it's like, you know, what's the chances that God exists? Well, which God? What kind? Like anything? Okay, I guess. But
I think I think generally the question
the
is
God
like
of the God that Jehovah's Witnesses believe in? Almost certainly not. Like,
no,
I don't know.
clearly, but I would say
Like
the
pantheism?
honest
Okay, 1 to
interpretation.
1.
Sure, but the charitable interpretation of the question would be like, do you believe in like what's the chance of like a prime mover, basically, like a creator that
A
with
personal being,
purpose.
a mind. But see, this
So
is
I-
it. Yes,
I-
question, but like, I've been watching original Star Trek. 30% of episodes are about this question. Like,
So
what
this
do you
is-
mean? Like, could
this is
a
my
mind
level
be a
of it.
computer,
I feel like
a
that's-
super
that-
advanced computer?
I can put
Feels-
on.
Feels
I
like it's
can-
pretty obviously that the interpretation of the question is there a prime mover?
But I mean, but again,
So
like,
the,
does
okay,
that prime mover, like, what is a mind? Like a mind that's analogous to our mind, or some other kind of mind?
Is there intention behind the universe? I think that's pretty.
I have
There
two
you go, there's
lenses.
another.
I have two lenses, and I can kind of like put on one lens or put on the other end. One lens is if I'm an atheist, I'm a damned atheist. I'm a damned atheist for your dumb deist gods too.
Yeah.
I'm a damned atheist for your dumb woo. I'm a damned atheist for your dumb Neoplatonism. I'm a damned atheist for your Kara psychonaut whatever bullshit stuff.
Yeah.
I'm an atheist for all of that
The-
stuff.
The
Then
way
the
I put
other
it for a
lens
while-
is I can play along and think that you are all hinting at something that's maybe actually there and is in the world. And if I am going to give that leverage, I'm going to give that leverage to everybody equally. Like I'm not going to say, well, the Mormons are for sure. Yeah, they cause harm,
is
so
the
we're not
way-
going to do this. But Bill Real can have his bullshit. Like,
This is
no,
the way
it's
can,
like I can play with both of you, or I can say, nah, I believe in none of it, but it's got to be one or the other.
The thing, if Christopher, to answer the question, the best way I can answer your question, if you ask me, is there a God? My answer is, I don't know. I'm agnostic. If your question is, do you believe in God? I say, no, I'm an atheist. That's the distinction. Like, do I know? No. Do I believe? No.
And if people are positing gods and all that sorts of stuff, like I might agree with Flip, like there's levels of stuff like, well, there's more to believe with that sort of idea, with that sort of thing. But at the same time, I think in that pragmatic way, they all have an equally valid thing of they might be hinting at something real that I just can't see or see if we're going to play that game. Like Bill Real might be talking about some sort of woo that he saw on an ayahuasca trip that's real about the energy of the universe. And Jacob Hansen might be talking about something that's real about this community and all this stuff, this underlying thing, this thing that maybe really actually happened. Or I can say all of it, no. All of it, no. Even your Spinoza God. Like, you fuck your Spinoza God. You know, like I don't like any, like it's either one or the other for me. And like I can put on either lens at either time. It's just when one person like Bill Real starts saying, you can't have yours, but I got mine. That's where I put like, all right, we're doing all of it or none of it, you know, and that's how That's how I roll with it. But we can play with that. We don't know everything that everybody else knows, and maybe everybody else is hitting at it. And if we're going to do that, it's worth listening to and hearing what the people are getting at. And even if it's not true, there might be wisdom or beneficial things in the world and stuff that they put together that I'm not able to see or witness or understand very well. I heard somebody explain it like sometimes the stuff that's going on in the world is you're a dog trying to understand what's going on inside of a beehive. You don't get it. You don't know what's going on there. And like I can buy like that level of a thing kind of going on in the universe or something like that. But and maybe I don't get it, and some people are hinting at it or getting at it, or their myth gets at it the same way that myth of the coffee helps people to procreate. There might be whatever. Like, but then there's the other level of it is that if it's gonna be a no, it's gonna be a no to all of you.
Yeah.
And telling me, oh, that's a cult. But I knew some of these people. I thought, they're not in a cult. It just doesn't seem like that at all. However you define that, So I never really bought into that. And I don't even today think Mormonism is a cult, even though I know some Christian denominations.
Whoa! Did you just say you don't view Mormonism as a cult?
I don't, because we have to define these terms. What do you mean by? I mean,
what do you mean? What do you mean by cult?
Well, usually it's a cult of personality. There's a single leader who is inerrant and must be obeyed and cannot be disobeyed, and so on. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know that much about Mormonism compared to you guys, but could you leave the church without dire ramifications? I guess the fundamentalists.
Yes.
Yeah, but the regular Mormon church. Okay. I mean,
Michael, we need to spend some time together, my brother.
Okay, well let's explore this. I mean, okay, so maybe I'm wrong, but
I should have. I mean, if I had an editor, I'd hard cut to the thing of like the 100 times he said, "We don't want to call it a cult. We're not."
I know it's so absurd, but it's also like. He's saying we need to spend some time together, as if he would then explain to him in that time that they spent together why it is so difficult to leave the Mormon church. But he wouldn't. Michael Shermer would be like, no, I've written a book about this, and I'm a pretty strong authority on the subject, and I think that it's harder to leave a lot of other cults.
John Dehlin has a series of 6 discussions that he'd like to have with Michael Shermer about how Mormonism is a cult.
What year were you born, Shermer?
Like Mitt Romney, I think typical.
No, I'm going to admit to a thing because I'm just going back to what I was thinking. I told this to you guys in the chat, but one of the ways that I admit that I can't help but think in a woo-ish way, and I both do it pragmatically, like I think you've got to think like this or you'll become an autistic computer brain, but there's also a level of me that I recognize that I can't help but think it, that I can't help but look at humans as having transcendent eternal worth. It's like that's like the biggest and what I say by that, like I can't help it. Like I can't help but view it that way. I could say, nah, you're just a useless eater. And no matter like how much I just say that, I can't not see the person as maybe being like eternally transcendent. Like that's the one area where like I know that I fail at being hard atheist, that could be a pragmatic thing, and that's one of the things that I think one of the metaphysical things you get in danger of losing when you go around teaching people that we are just useless eaters.
I like that Christopher Rice comment: cult bad, tribe good.
Right, or am I wrong about that?
Well, we can talk about that, but we don't want to.
Describe that leader again.
We don't want to. Maybe we'll have you up for a follow-up episode to talk about that, but we don't want to squander our time with you, with us talking. We want you talking.
I don't mind that. I like to learn. I already know what I think. I want to hear from you guys. I mean, just compared to say like a Jim Jonestown and all that stuff. That no one joins a cult; they join a group that they think is going to be good. And he was a real pioneer in integrating the Christian church in San Francisco from Indiana, where it was
Commie Church. Angela Davis involved. Look up how Angela Davis was involved with Jim Jones. That's an interesting rabbit hole.
Christian churches were segregated, black and white, and he was one of the first to integrate them and then move to San Francisco, where it was more tolerant and liberal. You can see pictures of the crazy Jim Jones with major politicians like Jerry Brown, the governor. He was Harvey Milk, the mayor of New York, who was assassinated for being gay, and so on. He was a real pioneer in that. But then slowly but surely things went down the rabbit hole where there was sexual exploitation, financial exploitation. They started investigating him. That's when he took off for Guyana with his followers. Yeah. There it shifts from being kind of a fringy liberal Christian sect to a cult. Now, I guess we could say that when Brigham Young took the group to Utah after the death of Joseph Smith. Maybe there it shifts to be more cult-like, or I don't know. I mean, usually cults are defined by sociologists as they're kind of marginalized away from mainstream religions. Sometimes they're called new religious movements. But where it becomes dangerous cult-like is where you can't leave, where you have little contact with outsiders, and you get little information from other people about the way the world actually is. You're only streaming information from the group, and then the controls over your life, what you eat, how much you sleep.
It's coming up, and then it's longer a clip than I'd like it to be. But like he brings up Hassan, and Shermer's not crazy impressed with Hassan because he thinks it's.
He
like
brings
too
up.
much.
Oh yeah.
Those sorts of things become more draconian. That's when it shifts from sect to cult. And and
because they got Hassan, Kara got Hassan, and Zelf and the Chef got Hassan, and now they just Hassan, and especially when they want to like aim it, like we got proof it's a cult.
They're that,
even though Hassan never even gave that to them, really.
Is that your sense of the modern Mormon church?
So I'll give you a really, I don't want to squander our time, but I'll give you, since you like dialogue, I'll give you my quick perspective. The framework that I like to think about cults within is the easiest framework is Stephen Hassan's bite model. Basically, to what extent do they control your behavior? Does the organization control your behavior? To what extent do they control the information that you receive? To what degree do they try and control your thoughts? And then to what extent do they use emotion to manipulate you? Now, I'm going to pause that for a second and go to my understanding of Joseph Smith. If you look at Joseph Smith and what he did, he absolutely had a totalistic control over his membership. He took over 30 women to be his wives, 14-year-old girls, mother-daughter pairs, sister pairs. He definitely claimed to be God and Jesus's mouthpiece on the earth, and you were not allowed to criticize him. And if you tried to speak ill against the organization or defect from it, you would be defamed and smeared and potentially fear for your life. And so in that case,
You now
I
talk about
think
modern
early Mormonism
Mormonism
during Joseph Smith's day absolutely qualified as a cult. And the only difference between, in my view, Joseph Smith and like Warren Jeffs or David Koresh or Jim Jones is that he was martyred before the apocalyptic event happened, where
he said that like he thought Joseph Smith was leading them all to like a suicide pact. Like I don't think that follows at all.
A large amount of his followers were killed, but it certainly reached the point where he raised a militia, started marching the militia throughout cities in Illinois, and the governor got involved. And there very well could have been some sort of armed conflict that would have led to thousands of Mormons being killed. And that actually almost happened in Missouri before it almost happened in Illinois. Now, Rebecca, do you want to give a quick, do you agree or disagree with my characterization of Joseph Smith's Mormonism?
No, I absolutely agree.
Like a war with a government is different than a suicide pact, Jim Jones Kool-Aid drinking incident.
The other thing
I would push
Jim
it forward.
Jones is that it was always a communist endeavor. It was I don't know how to put this, like, and this is something I only learned like in the last few years, having looked into it. But the whole idea about like it being a Christian church that was communist, like no. It was just communism using Christianity as a form of entryism. The Jesus stuff was just
that's why Angela
communism.
Davis was so crazy about it and pushing it, and like she even brought it up and was like something with the presidency and all that stuff.
Even to Brigham Young's time in Salt Lake, where
Jimmy Carter was involved with Jim Jones.
Or if you wanted to leave, you actually might have been in danger of your life being taken. There was all kinds of nuances there, and it was basically run sort of like, if I could call it, a mob state. So yeah, there's all kinds of things there that maybe now is not the time to go into, but it is very interesting.
Well, yeah, that's all good. I agree. But is it that way today? I don't even know who the current leader is, but is he like that?
So the way I like to think of it, I don't want to sound like a
the bite
like a disciple. I don't want to sound like a disciple of Stephen Hassan.
The bite model.
But this is just a really convenient way to talk about it. Stephen likes to talk about this influence continuum. There's kind of a continuum of harm, from destructive and unhealthy to constructive and healthy. And so I guess he would say there might be benign cults and then more destructive cults. And it's on a continuum. And I would definitely agree with you that Mormonism falls more in the, more. It doesn't quite reach the level of Scientology, even Jehovah's Witnesses, and Jonestown in terms of its destructive, unhealthy place on the continuum. But in some sense, I would say that's part of the genius of Mormonism, because by being what some would call a nice cult or a less severe cult, they're able to have Senate Majority Leader and Harry Reid, a major presidential candidate, senators and members of the House of Representatives, members of the judiciary branch. It's their moving a little bit left on that continuum that allows them to be a $250 billion church and have all the influence that it has. But
I saw
they don't use that $250 billion the way other people do. I mean, they have some in Utah, especially. They have political influence, but they're not. Well, we saw it in California, but they didn't get very far with that. They had a huge backlash. But one of the reasons they don't spend it very much is because they can't get that involved in this stuff. They have to do it clandestine. They can't put money into it the way Soros and Bill Gates do. They wish they could, but they can't.
Oh, that 60 Minutes piece Sunday. Unbelievable. Bigger than Harvard.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously there's some, but that would be more legal ramifications of being a 501c3 nonprofit religion, not paying taxes on that money. That could definitely be challenged.
Wait, is he
Less on
shutting
theological
down
grounds and more
501c3s?
on legal grounds. I was going to say Steve
Shut him
Hassan's
up,
bite
John.
model.
Shut him up.
Here it is, Steve Hassan's bite model.
I think it goes too far. Personally, I like Steve a lot. I just had him on my show, for his book, The Cult of Trump. So we got into this, and I just point blank asked him, "Do you really think 74 million Americans who voted for Trump are in a cult? I mean, like we think of cult members like bug-eyed," and he said, "Yes, I do." It's like, come on, no. I mean, maybe the nut jobs at the January 6th insurrection, or the people that show up at his speeches that are with the ranting and chanting and signs. Okay, some of those are maybe in a cult-like position for Trump, but most people just vote their tribe. Right? I'm a Republican. I don't like Trump, but I'm not voting for Hillary, so I vote for Trump. I think that's what most of the GOP is. They just sort of fall into line. That's how the game is played, and so there, I don't think the cult model, the bite model, actually fits at all in that sense. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on that.
Well, I would love to further this conversation, and we try to avoid being too
back. There it is.
Political on Mormon Stories because we don't want to alienate half our audience.
We try to avoid being too political. We don't want to alienate half our
audience. How much of your audience do you reasonably suspect is conservative, John Dehlin?
Yeah, I want to note too that later
you would pander to them. Don't get me wrong. If John Dehlin thought that saluting and saying Heil Hitler would get him an audience, he'd fucking do it.
Yeah, and later when it's time for him to choose like an example of a conspiracy to go down, he chooses, let's go with Republicans thinking about election fraud. That's his choice that he goes with. Let's see.
One thing, there's the comment from Edge Barb where he talks about a mass suicide. It was partially a suicide and partially a massacre. Those kids were injected with drugs.
You can listen to that. You can like listen to like the whole entire.
I've listened to the death type twice. That's the other thing. Like, it's in the first minute that he communist revolutionary suicide.
Yeah, he just keeps talking as everybody keeps drinking the stuff, and he keeps telling them to drink it and drink it and drink it, and there's like it goes on for like 20.
The saddest part is like you hear one lady get up and say like, "Do we really need to do this?" And she's trying to be all reasonable about it. God, it's tragic.
Yeah, it was terrible. Let's see here. The next thing, let's go to the new atheism description. But anyway, that throws like a wet rag on what Mormon Stories channel has been pushing for a couple years, that all the Trumpism and all the Mormonism is a cult. Like there's just one great big wet rag on it right there.
I love
but
that.
I appreciate that he dared to have somebody on finally who dared to have a different opinion about that.
It just took it took I mean, that thing is like the only reason we know that John Dehlin did this is because of how big a name Michael Shermer
celebrity status of it. And then the other end of it is we've all been kicked off of this stuff for saying equivalent, even less directly, the same thing.
Like, I mean, like you say, we've gotten, I mean, not me specifically, but people like us have gotten blocked for referencing Michael Shermer in Mormon Stories circles.
It was sort of during the post 9/11 aftermath where new atheism kind of emerged. There was Hitchens and Dawkins and Sam Harris and you and Dennett and others. I just can you spend a few minutes talking about your experience in that new atheism kind of movement and how you feel like that ended up shaking out for our American culture more broadly? I know that's a pretty big question, but do your best in a couple minutes.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. As I mentioned in my short bio, even as late as the 1990s, being an atheist was not a thing. The numbers were still pretty small, low single-digit percentage, and it was not even a point of discussion. Like, what's the right position? Atheism, agnosticism. I mean, there was in academia and in theological discussions or philosophy. What is an agnostic exactly, and what does it mean to be a theist? And arguments for and against God's existence. Those have been around since Aquinas. But it became a social movement in the 2000s. You mentioned Dawkins. Dawkins was really the trigger of this. The God Delusion sold more than all those other books combined. Harris and Hitchens and Dennett and others. And he's such a, I would say, charismatic. He's not charismatic in the kind of preacher sense, but he carries a lot of weight as a world-renowned, world-class scientist. And Oxford Don, the British accent, the whole thing. Hitch was a little more edgy in his kind of investigative journalist, activist style. But I think Dawkins sort of carried the intellectual weight for people who didn't believe in God, but never said anything. They just kind of kept their mouth shut, sort of like people do today about hot button issues out of fear of being canceled, which is a real thing. And so he kind of enabled people. And then
you have to slip that in. which is a real thing.
Sam and Hitch and Dennett and again others. And then it became, there was a cut. The first cut was, how militant are you? So I wrote one of my Scientific American columns on Richard's book and the New Atheism Phenomenon. And I said, oh, this is all great for us, but let's not take it too far. If you just tell people they're complete morons to believe in God, you're just going to alienate them. And Dennett had published a piece in the New York Times promoting this new concept called the Brights. This was a couple that had invented this word.
I love Dennett, but I hated that.
The Brights, that was immediate cringe for me. It's like, no, we don't need
worse than intellectual dark web. Like, you go to like some movement, you're with something, and like somebody suggests something like that, and then it picks up and takes because you're like, ah.
I'm glad that Brights never caught on. It was immediately shit on, and largely because I think most of the atheist community was like, "Ooh, no,
yeah, you can't rescue this stuff. We can't save it."
The word atheism. They said atheism is too pejorative. It carries a lot of baggage in people's minds. We need a cheerier, happier word. And so, it's like the homosexuality movement, but now called the LGB movement, really. This was before the T. They.
I didn't even catch that the first time. Oh man, there's all. The second time I listened to this, I caught all sorts of little things too that I didn't hear the first time. But,
that's awesome.
Said, they're gays, right? It's a happy word. We're gays, gay pride, gay march, and so on. So we need a happy word like this. So the word was Brights. They came up with this couple. So Dan actually got this published in the New York Times where he said, let's start a movement. We're now going to call ourselves the Brights, not atheists. And forget all that agnostic atheism, non-theism, skepticism. Forget all that. We're the Brights. And so it's like, but the problem is that language
I forgot about all
doesn't work that way. You can't do it from the top down by fiat and say, this is the words we're now going to use. They just start changing from the bottom up. Like, who invented the word 9/11? Nobody. People just started using it, and then everybody was using it.
Wait, talking about inventing words, is this kind of hinting at something here?
And it's like the pronouns, a popular gender pronoun thing now. There was no top-down decree. We're now going to start doing this. Just everybody started doing it. Not me, but lots of people. And so it's kind of like that. So it never really took off, and then people were making fun of the Brights. So who are the other people? The Dims? And a lot of the Brights would go, yeah, they're pretty dim. Okay. So that was the first cut, right? That you got to really be militant. You got to be like Hitch, like get right in their face. And Hitch would even say, oh yeah, just lay it right out there. And but a lot of us didn't feel that way. So I got a heap of hate on me. Even I'm an atheist from atheists going, no, you're wrong, Shermer. You gotta attack these people. All right. So that was the first cut. Then in the late 2000s, maybe 2009, 2010 or so, there was another cut, the Atheist Plus movement. The plus was social justice. Well, what is that? I believe in social justice. I'm woke, woke in the original African American sense of being aware or awake to the discrimination and bigotry.
Wait, it has a definition. Oh,
what?
Past, and we should do something about
Somebody
this.
call John DeLynn and tell him to argue with Michael Shermer.
Tell him off for mentioning woke. What does this have to do with Mormonism? Kick him off. Ban him. Ban this post. Ban this post.
Social justice means something else. It means far left, woke progressive politics. And that if you're a real atheist, you'll also be a social justice warrior. And boy, that eliminated, like 80% of the people that would have been part of that group right off the bat, because they politicized it. Here are the 12 things you got to believe on abortion, immigration, gun control, climate change, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, but what if I tick the box for 8 of the 12? Oh, you're out. It's like, okay. And I actually have some thoughts on this. And I think this happens to most social groups. Marxists, thought amongst themselves about who is the true Marxist. Are you a Stalinist, a Leninist, a Trotskyist, and so on. And feminist groups splintered over this. Who's the true feminist? And even
man,
so much there.
They politicize it. Let's see, militant. How it got politicized? Yeah, that's the stuff that's already 10 years past rescuing. And then as Jared sees, everybody calls them Reddit atheists nowadays, and that's mostly what dominates the internet and the interwebs and all that stuff. And it's all the people with the circular reasoning that, whoa, we became atheists, so now we're rational, which is basically who DeLynn was coming into that conversation. Hey, we're going to talk about rationality with Mark Shermer. So he tries to. Oh, I like the term that he mentioned. I think he said it came from Freud, but there's the narcissism of small differences that people can't get along with. Then DeLynn asked him if Mormons are more likely to believe in conspiracies. Let's see about that. Conspiracy. Come on. How far into it was? Man, they said a lot.
What are you looking for?
He says Mormons. John Dehlin assumes Mormons are more likely to believe in conspiracies than
unless people become
religious.
religious.
Funny.
Or are you open to the idea that maybe, and this is going to lead into our discussion of conspiracies and conspiracy theories, but do you see it as a win when people become more secular, less religious? Or do you think there's an important social place for people having, let's just say, some of the more benign religious beliefs?
Oh, both. For sure. I think it's a win in the sense that, back to talking about knowledge as justified true belief, we should believe things that don't need to be believed in to be true. That is, they're actually true. Philip K. Dick's famous line.
Where's the conspiracy? He asked him. I don't know. Let's see if this is the quote.
There's a lot of things like that. I think religion is something like that. There's a lot of mythic truths that we hold. In the conspiracy book, I talk about these proxy conspiracisms. They kind of stand in for something else. Whether they're true or not is sort of beside the point. It's just something you hold for some other reason. And I think religion is a lot like that. But again, if the predictions that without religion people would not be good is not true. And European countries are way ahead of us on this. Post World War II, their rates of religiosity plummeted. They're like 10%. That attend church, not 50 or 60%. And they haven't collapsed. Their societies are actually quite a bit better. Their cultures, their politics, their economics, their social system, by almost any measure: abortion rates, STD rates, out of wedlock pregnancy rates, suicide rates, infant mortality rates.
Yeah, let's see.
Where is the difference between a conspiracy and a conspiracy theory? Is it okay if we start there?
Sure.
All right, let's jump in.
So conspiracy is two or more people plotting in secret to do something to a third party or person without their knowledge or consent. A conspiracy theory is a theory about that. That is the claim that this is actually happening. And then a conspiracist is somebody who thinks that these things are happening, again, whether they're true or not. So it's really a signal detection problem, as I presented in the book. That is to say, there are conspiracies, for sure. These happen all the time. Watergate was a conspiracy. The assassination of Lincoln was a conspiracy. The CIA program, MK Ultra, to conduct mind control experiments on citizens, U.S. citizens, without their knowledge or consent. That's a conspiracy. Tuskegee experiments by the U.S. Department of Health on African Americans, not treating them for syphilis to see what the effects are. Without their knowledge or consent, that's a conspiracy. Much of activities of the CIA in foreign countries to rig elections, assassinate foreign leaders.
Yeah, where's the one where it says the Mormons are more likely?
I don't know even how to find that, but that was great.
It's mentioned so many times. The word conspiracy is mentioned.
Yeah, I know. He asked him, "Do you think Mormons are more likely to believe in, more or less likely to believe in conspiracies?" And he said, not more likely at all. It's right and left wing people. Yeah.
Talk amongst yourselves. Talk about beer. What are you guys drinking? Beers? You guys drinking the alcohols?
I'm drinking Crystal Light. I have a new rule, right?
Are you on a month off?
No, I'm not on a month off. I just my rule is only one time on the weekend, and I don't want it to be while I'm streaming. I want to really savor my one time.
Nice.
It would be illegal, and so that would be a conspiracy.
Okay. I think we need to talk about how Mormons, generally speaking, Orthodox Mormons, tend to be very well attracted to conspiracy theories like COVID conspiracy theories or vaccine conspiracy theories or New World Order type conspiracy theories. I want to save that till later. So in that sense, it very much ties to your book. But I really do. Here's the problem I'm struggling with, Michael Shermer. As I read through your book and I learned about Popper again, Karl Popper, right? And his rules of falsifiability, as I learned about ECRE, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And then as you go into your baloney.
That is a perfect segue into it, though, because he is saying we need to talk about how Mormons are more prone to conspiracy theories. I don't think that comes till later, though.
Popper, talking Karl Popper.
Karl Popper,
that poor bastard that
falsifiability. He's also one of he's got an entire book about how historicism is bullshit, and what historicism is any sort of a Hegelian idea, or some sort of thing that the future is going towards some sort of a thing that is set in stone, that it's going to.
Oh, I thought he played harmonica for Blues Traveler.
That too. I mean,
what's that guy's name? He's also Popper.
Popper.
Right?
John
Popper. That's right, John Popper.
Here we go. I think we got it.
when you mentioned Mormons tend to fall for a lot of these conspiracy theories, I myself personally was raised by conspiracy theorists who were also professionals and scientists. So it was always a strange kind of a juxtaposition for me. But I was raised to think the moon landing never happened, and that Area 51, the aliens were
beliefs who ended up like.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we don't have time to get into that.
Especially a mother who had weird Mormon beliefs who ended up likely conspiring to kill 2 of her ex-husbands.
That's right. Yes.
Two of her own children, and
yeah, that's a national story. Yeah, of course I know that's
right.
Yeah.
Her last name
so
actually Biblioteca, because
I want to generalize and say most Mormons are likely to kill their kids and their spouses or whatever, because of the counterfactuals. How many have that background and they never do anything like that? Most Mormons don't kill their
Maybe I gotta look up the word liberals. Maybe
that word. So I think the edge cases.
Yeah,
like that
he talks about liberals,
unless mental illness
or left wing,
weird thing like that. Yes, the consequences of believing in a secret satanic cult of some kind are dangerous. Like the Pizzagate I talk about in the book. Most people don't really believe that Hillary Clinton is running.
Man, was this all the way up here?
Just a mini question now that you jarred it from my brain before we go into your rubric for evaluating conspiracy theory. There's probably a perception that political liberals are less inclined to believe in conspiracy theories than political conservatives.
Oh, is that
are
a
there
perception?
Significant conspiracy theories that political liberals in the United States tend to glom onto?
Oh, sure, of course.
And if so, what are they?
And political liberals are just as conspiratorial minded as political conservatives. Well, look at the collusion, the Steele dossier and the collusion conspiracy theory. That Trump was conspiring with the Russians to steal the 2016 election. Not true. We just saw the story yesterday. The big investigation, how the FBI really mucked this up. They really did a terrible job. They even cited, confirmation bias and hindsight bias and their inability to test their hypotheses, to evaluate counter evidence to their claim that there was collusion going on and so on. That's a total liberal conspiracy theory. Liberals are more likely to suspect big pharma is up to no good, or big corporate America is up to no good. Whereas conservatives think it's more like the government agents are up to no good, the deep state, QAnon, that's more of a right-wing conspiracy theory. So we know from tons of studies, liberals are just as conspiratorial minded as conservatives. The line is conspiracy theories are for losers. The losers in this case being whoever lost the election tends to think that the other side cheated. And you can go back in history and look at every time a Democrat loses any election, they always think the Republicans were up to no good. They had some shenanigans. There were some voter inconsistencies. And
so some of the things like he brings up, John chooses okay, we're going to choose an example and go through the example. And so he chooses
2020 election.
2020 elections. But
yeah.
It's like right through that, you had like Stacey Abrams never gave up her election through that whole entire time period.
God.
Through that same time period, I can pull up quotes of Hillary Clinton saying it was stolen from her and all that sort of stuff.
Feminism is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Well, this is one of my criticisms of Shermer here, is that he brings up the Durham report and he brings up that Trump's that whole entire thing was done to him, and then he turns around and says something about well, in these election things, you can't have that many people working against you to really have a conspiracy theory. It comes out. But you go, but that's what it was.
That's exactly what happened.
The Durham report just reveals that there was a conspiracy happening.
There was a major conspiracy theory, and they did all tell on each other. And in Time magazine, they bragged about their election fortification.
The Durham report shows us that Hillary lied, Adam Schiff lied, the FBI lied, Rachel Maddow lied. All these people who said there was evidence lied. There was never any evidence.
Lies.
Did Rachel Maddow lie, or is she dumb enough to believe the shit that she said?
I always thought she actually believed it.
Yeah. I mean, I think she believed it, but she also lied, where it's at some point you got to produce the goods. And she knew the whole time she was saying that there were no goods. Otherwise she would have produced them.
But she cried, so
yeah.
I think it's time to go
she cried when the Mueller report, or what was it? Yeah, the Mueller report.
Oh yeah,
and she cried because
I think she also cried when she got a hold of the W-2s, and
the only person who cries more than Rachel Maddow is fucking Jimmy Kimmel. So
I always said it. I said it to my parents: is she's Alex Jones. She's left wing's Alex Jones. That's what she is. They pass her off as news or whatever, but you can complain about Alex Jones. Well, Alex Jones was probably more right more often.
I feel like your Mormon experience is the exact opposite of mine. Because you always talk about how your parents...
My parents are super...
are more lefty and stuff.
That's a Trump thing, man. I mean, they were... My dad, like I've said before, he was on James E. Faust's political campaigns. And James E. Faust, known to people, was a Democrat.
I got my dad... He was? No, I didn't know that.
And
my dad who's super right. So
I remember when I was a teenager, I just assumed I was really far left or something because I was like, "No, gay marriage is fine," and stuff like that. But
but James E. Faust, Utah Democrat in the 70s, you really are talking about something that's
Yeah, in
you
the
know
70s.
might as well be right wing of the 90s, Republicans, but yeah, my dad always kind of claimed it, and so he was like generally like a Democrat, a Utah Democrat, like across all those years, but he wasn't crazy political or like crazy activist in it. The Trump thing broke him, like it broke so many other people. And I often say I think it was more like aesthetic injury than it was anything. Like they're just like, no, we can't have this guy. Is almost kind of like, how Mormons get more offended at somebody who is smoking a cigarette than is maybe doing something. It's visible. It's just this visible growth thing. I don't like the visible growth thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that George Bush was doing whatever in his world. The visible growth thing, we react.
It's like a religion full of Vosh. That's what I always describe myself as a Mormon Vosh when I was Mormon, because I can't I don't like saying this because it's embarrassing, but I cared way more about perception and optics than I did about actual character.
Yeah. Which unfortunately I think was a big part of it, especially younger Mormonism. But it's one of those things that I think got cleaned up nowadays because most of the people who liked to do the finger wagging, they went to where the finger wagging is good, and the finger wagging is good, not in the Relief Society anymore.
Yeah.
The finger wagging got good over on the ex-Mormon side.
One more. A lot of people told me I shouldn't have you on because you have made at least some criticisms of transgender topics. And this is a very sensitive and important topic to me, but I do want to give you a chance to at least, number one, specify whether you believe that there is some value or relevance or credibility to the transgender experience. And then if people want to say you're kind of
I don't know, is a weird way to start it. Like what? I mean, is he kind of trying to give him an out there, or does John actually care about that?
Anti-trans, how would you respond to that question as well?
First of all, we have a whole issue of skeptic on gender dysphoria and all the issues around trans issues related to science and medicine and so on. So, I just want to know what's true. And in this case, there's a lot of science behind some of the claims, and the science is quite mixed in other claims. My main focus, though, is I know some trans people. Of course, there are people who are trans. There are people who are truly gender dysphoria. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, one, conflicting rights issues, right? So should a male to female trans be allowed to compete against biological women in women's sports? The answer is no, they shouldn't, because they're not women. They are men. These are post-puberty men.
Man, kick that Jonathan Streeter off. I mean, this is Michael Shermer. I mean, oh gosh. Why did I mix up those names? Like, when have I seen? Oh, wait, because Jonathan Streeter got kicked off for saying stuff that's nowhere near as direct.
Yeah, he actually never said these are men.
Never once like that.
Who have all the benefits of going through puberty with all the testosterone changes and so on, that cannot be mitigated by puberty blockers and things like that. And the NCAA is now coming around this. The international body that governs NCAA swimming is realizing this is the case and so on. And I'm a defender of women's rights. And in many of these cases, women's rights are being violated. To allow this Will Thomas, the Penn State swimmer who declared himself to be a woman and grew her hair long, and is already a male and did the required NCAA swimming 1 year of testosterone suppression, and then entered women's swimming meets where she was once ranked in over 400th in the country, is now number one, beating women. She's eliminating women and ruining careers. She's walking around in a locker room naked.
I feel like this is like when you have to hold your dog's face against the pee in the carpet or something like that, like I feel like I'm watching like that moment.
With his full junk on display for women who are naked changing. 5 years ago, liberals would have been outraged. They would have been incensed. They would have been apoplectic. Arrest him for sexual harassment and indecent exposure. Now, what do liberals say? Oh, he's stunning and brave. No, he's not. Okay, that's a completely separate issue from people who identify as trans. They're not trying to hurt anybody. They're not violating women's rights or anything like that. This thing has morphed into complete insanity. If you think that men can menstruate, you've lost your mind. No, they can't.
So you're
okay. Here's the thing.
That's a direct punch at Dilla Hunty, who he knows was part of the Atheism Plus rift.
Sure, he says that, but this kind of feels like it's almost our fault for indulging this, even to the point that we did, because it's like we were willing to pretend that they're women up to a certain point, and then we were shocked when that point was crossed, and they were angry with us for not pretending anymore. Because it's like so many people were willing to say, like, yeah, just do your thing and be a woman, and I'll say the words that mean you're a woman. I'll call you she, her, or whatever.
Yeah.
But then the moment it got to actually proving that you believe that they're a woman, you buckled and said, no, okay, look, I was pretending back there, and then of course they're gonna be mad about it. Like, so you just got to tell them, like, I was wrong to pretend that you were a woman at all. I guess is what I have to say, because. Like, if I don't think anybody actually believes that a trans woman is a woman. I'm really, like, there's some actually delusional people, some gender dysphoric people that might believe it, but I don't think that people do, because I would ask them, like, if you got a 4-year-old kid and gun to your head, you got to choose between a 20-year-old man and a 20-year-old woman to babysit that kid for an entire night. Who do you choose? They're always going to choose the 20-year-old woman, and that's because men are more likely to be sexual predators. That's just
like in the absence of any other information, you'd pick the woman.
Yeah. So then if I then reframe that question and say, okay, then gun to your head, got to choose 2 strangers, 20-year-old woman, 20-year-old trans woman. Who are you going to choose? Like, they're going to choose, I'll bet you anything, the cisgender woman every time, because they don't, when the stakes are low, they're willing to say that no, transgender women are women. Trans women are real women, because all the stakes are right now is that I have to change the word that I'm saying around you. Those are low stakes. But once the stakes get higher, it shows the actual belief. And like, fuck it, no, I don't really believe this thing.
You know what?
That's true of all the mythological things. I got in an argument because, like, I saw these people arguing about, like, critical race theory on the Salt Lake Tribune or something like that, and these other things, and they were saying, well, you had prayer in school. Well, you had this in school. And you say, yes, all of your religions not in the school. You can all have them. The old thing, you can swing your arms around until, like, starts hitting, like, the tip of my nose or the tip of children's noses. Like, it's this whole thing of
but then they would say, how does that affect you?
And so people say, why don't you go yell at a Mormon that, hey, there's no golden plates, every single Mormon I meet. But I also don't walk up to every transgender person I meet and say, you're actually a boy, but there's a moment in each of those places. Like, I'll say, hey, I'll allow your beliefs, and even say there's maybe something that in you that, like, I don't get, and you're free to do it, and there's something great in it for you and all that stuff. And maybe I can learn from you, there's interesting things in the world that come from you, all that stuff. As soon as you barge into places you're not supposed to be, we got to fight.
No, I have this discussion with people anytime they do that whole, like, anytime they do that whole, like, what is it? How does it affect you argument? I'll be like, well, here's the deal. Like, the difference between the Christian movement and the transgender movement, I don't have a problem with either one. I'm never going to stop either one from believing the things they do. I don't believe the things that they do, but I'm not going to stop them. If the Christians start telling me, hey, here's the deal. Every single time we have a conversation, you have to close the conversation by saying Christ is king. I'm going to tell them, well, I don't believe that. And they say, but, like, I'll kill myself if you don't say it. I'll say, well, okay, what am I supposed to do here? Because there's this archetype of the man, like the insecure boyfriend.
You get fired if you don't say Christ.
There's the archetype of the insecure boyfriend who will threaten to kill himself anytime the girl, like, threatens to break up with him or wants to get away or whatever. And anybody with any amount of reason will tell that girl, like, get the fuck away from him. They're not going to say, well, he's going to kill himself. You gotta do what he says. No, we don't do that. We don't negotiate with terrorists, even if they're just auto terrorists.
Well, like, fine. I'll be.
And so if they're telling me, like, you got to say Christ is king, I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to fucking say it because I don't believe it.
I'll tell you what. Fine, Jared. We'll back off. If you don't, we won't say you can kill yourself. But you can't come on the podcast unless you say Christ is king. That's the.
But that's the thing.
Lynn point. That's the point of what we've been saying with all these ex-Mormons all this time, is that they've been blocking and barring people out because it's all logical positivism when they're going after the Mormons. But then as soon as their thing gets attacked, like, wait a minute, you're not being nice. You're causing harm.
That's the thing, though. Saying that Christ is king is positing, like, an actual belief. Like, it's the same as, like, using the pronouns. If you want me to use your pronouns, I'm saying a thing that I don't believe is true, because there's the one faction of people who are telling me, if you don't say Christ is king at the end of all of our conversations, I will kill myself. And I shouldn't negotiate with those people. But then everybody else around them, they're a minority, but everybody else around them is telling me, literally, how does it affect you to just say Christ is king? It's just decency. It's just empathy. And like, no, because I don't believe it. And I shouldn't have my virtue of not wanting to man, because I don't want, if a man says I'm going to kill myself, what should I do? I'll tell him not to do it. My virtue tells me, save this man's life if you can. I will not be held hostage by my virtue, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, oh, you don't want harm to be caused, so why in the hell, like, why wouldn't you just say the words? Say the words. No, I'm not gonna fucking say the words.
Yeah. Today at the store, I saw a person that had women's clothes, was wearing a skirt, was wearing a blouse, had a women's style of hair.
Dang it, I thought I was sneaking.
And I had this moment of like, that's not a woman. And it took me about half a second to realize, like, what's the giveaway? And then I realized, like, oh, you have a man's pelvis, and I can tell by how you walk.
Like, that's one of the things that's tricky about exolnasic. Like, exolnasic talks about all of the dimorphism, or the sexual dimorphism in things like your pancreas, your vocal box, the shape of your skull, the shape of you'll have to transhuman yourself till the end of time to.
Yeah, that's one thing that, like, I hadn't even considered before. But like pelvis, like, what do you do about the pelvis? That's mechanical, you know. And like, I mean, you can fake swish your butt, but you still aren't walking like a woman, because how women walk is because of a mechanical shape of how their hips fit into their pelvis and how their pelvis is shaped. And there's just, you can't change your bones. No amount of surgery or hormones is going to reshape your pelvis.
So I've got a long track record.
What if I get it shaved? What if they get in?
That's things like I say that, like, next week I'm going to hear about pelvis reconstruction. Somebody had their fucking coccyx broken so that their hips aren't display their hips.
Oh, I'm sure it's already happened.
That's such a weird hack doctor thing that, like, well, okay, I want you to feel good about yourself, and you don't like your jaw, so let me just cut some of your fucking bones off.
And
like,
tons of money in it, and they've said that they know that there's money in it.
I was watching this. It wasn't even a transgender. I think it was talking about just not reconstructive. It was cosmetic surgery, and one of the operations that this dude got was a skull, like, it was called a skull shortening or something. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Shaving, like eyebrow shaving,
They're like
no. It was skull shaving because you can't get your voice right because there's a level of cavity in your head that makes you sound male, and so that you have to reshape your head.
I'm sure people get tired of hearing like the conservative types yell about the Hippocratic Oath, but I don't know how you take that Hippocratic Oath has got to feel sacred to you when you take it. And then you take it and you're like, I'm going to shave part of this guy's fucking skull off. The thing that protects his brain, materially his soul, you know?
And a lot of the stuff they were crying about was legislation that just said some doctors can opt out of the stuff. And a lot of the stuff they're freaking out at there's anti-trans bills going on. And you guys are like, that's some of what the anti-trans bills is, that a doctor can't in their own good conscience opt out of some of the surgeries that you want done. And I have a track record on this, like even in like the bodybuilding world, I'm a long time standard. Like, don't take the freaking hormones. Just be you. Just do the stuff. Go be what you are and let the stuff be, because you're going to jack and mess yourself up. It's not worth it. It's not worth like doing any sort of that stuff.
I remember that. I had a very educational day when I lived with Chris Hanna, when he showed me like in a bodybuilder magazine, and he was pointing at like, that's steroids, see that there, that's steroids, see that there, that's steroids. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. Now I see it. Now I can see the little things where I'm like, oh, that's steroids. I can tell.
Well, especially as if like it keeps going over time.
Troy brought up a good point here, talking about video game animation, because I remember this being a big discussion. Like, why does the girl have to walk so what, girly? because they walk differently. Women are different. They're built
His
differently
motion
than men.
capture.
That's
wasn't it?
not men sexualizing women or exploiting them or anything like that. They just look differently. It's,
Like apparently
they look like women. Why would look? It reminds me of growing up. It reminds me of growing up, and like there's a lot of anybody who's Latino in Idaho Falls is Mexican, and I remember a lot of people being very sensitive to that. When I'd say, "Oh yeah, he's a Mexican guy," they'd be like, don't say Mexican. Say Hispanic. Like, wait, why would
Latinx?
Why would Mexican be insulting? He's from Mexico. Yeah, it's kind of a dick move for you to say that Mexican.
I like Mexico, and I like Mexicans.
No. So a woman walking like a woman isn't insulting.
Say it to an El Salvadorian, they'll get pissed.
They different sects of South Americans get really pissed off if you confuse them. But I'm just saying, being Mexican is not an insult. Being female is not an insult. So if you are a female and you walk like a female, that's not insulting. That's just an observation.
They have done studies where they track people's movement, just walking, and translate it into where there's just dots for all the joints. And if you show people just the dots, not only can they tell the boy dots from the girl dots, but the other interesting thing is that women are far more accurate than the men. Women are better at identifying from dots who is a boy dots and who's a girl dots.
Huh.
Yeah, this stuff. I mean, one thing I gotta say, once again, I started out with props. I'll give more props here. Like, I am so happy you guys are actually putting yourselves in position of getting your feet held to the fire on this. It's all I ever asked for. And like Forrest was saying, you guys got to go after Jacob more. I've been concerned or single-minded in looking at the ex-Mormon community and saying, hey, look at your own shit here a little bit. And I appreciate that Jacob's been part of the reason they have been looking at their own shit a little bit. But I mean, there's always been like this long-standing thing is like, if I can clean up the house here a little bit, we can get back to our old fights or whatever. But like in the meantime, like we've been trying to get through or talk to or say to these guys, hey, this ex-Mormon world has gotten extremely ideological. We're not beating this thing. We're not winning. We're not winning the world of defeating religious dogma. We're not doing it. It's not progress. It's just trade-off. And but if they actually do start talking and bringing people in and getting their feet held to the fire, well, maybe there would be such thing as a progress in the world. But
you're okay with respecting someone's chosen name, their pronouns, Absolutely. And their chosen identity, whether it's male, whether it's man or woman. It's just when it gets into things like sports, where you
women's spaces, bathrooms, locker rooms,
got it,
prisons.
Okay, that makes sense. Rebecca,
now the open-ended question is,
I mean, there was people already complaining in the chat all through it, but it's calling him a transphobe and a bigot and all that stuff.
That's the transphoberino right there.
The recent spike of several thousand%.
That Chris is the ex-Mormon John the Baptist. And, but the thing is, like, I mean, John the Baptist only ate crickets and honey. Chris only eats packages of pre-cooked brown rice and canned chicken. So there's that.
Yeah, that's about it. But it's also true that like I honestly believe, and I've brought it before, I don't go the whole rigmarole here, but like the community that we have here does owe itself to Mormonism a whole lot, and attacking itself so hard, the oikophobia we all have, what we were brought up in, the hatred of self, is the divide and conquer thing you need just to bring in some sort of outside force and turn us all into useful idiots, Pleasure Island, Soma, all that type of stuff. Like there's some sort of level that I say, like, you have to rescue and love what you grew up in. That's part of the whole thing. It doesn't mean you got to go to church every week, but it's like breaking it down is just setting us. It's just, Donkey Island and Pinocchio type stuff. And that doesn't mean I don't think you should criticize it or whatever, but at the same time too, that's why I like the imagery of the Christ figure as an archetype. There's an archetype in the concept of the one who could change it is the one who really actually loved it. The one who could change the Old Testament was the one who got it and got why it was there and loved it. And then that person could change it, you know, and was a perfect person. That helps, you know.
In one cohort of teenage girls, and no other cohort, not women 20 to 25, 25 to 30, so on, has come out as trans. There's a huge spike, several thousand %. Why is that? So there's two hypotheses: social contagion, which I think is the right one, or liberal tolerant society, so more coming out that are actually trans. So that debate is continuing, and we're getting more evidence of that. So anyway, okay, let's wrap it up. I got 1 minute.
Okay, Rebecca, one last question for Michael.
Oh, I don't even think we have time for a question.
And I feel somewhat that's what I'm doing. Because like I tell you what, I loved this atheist movement back. I loved it. I thought it was great, and then it just turned into this, and it feels like it can only ever do that.
I think Michael needs to go. I'm just going to say thank you, Michael, and thank you for helping us think more about thinking critically. I think that's what all of us in the post-Mormon world can learn a lot from you. So thank you, Michael, so much.
Michael, how can people support you? How can people support your work?
Go to skeptic.com, and you can subscribe to the magazine, join the society, and so on. Really, please, we're not anti-trans, not in the least. We are pro women's rights, and we want to know what's true. That's it. All right.
Otherwise, as I would say, John, please hold those up. That's exactly right. Not at all.
Yeah. I do, you know, that topic of transgenderism is a very volatile one. Yes. And I do kind of feel bad but I also didn't want to not ask it, but I know that the things that he said are highly controversial, highly polarizing. And, but I think that's what he stands for, is open discussion and evidence-based discussion. And so I guess I'm glad I asked it, even though there's a lot that could be discussed about that topic, right?
There's a lot, and maybe you'll have to have him back on again. But yeah, those are things, discussions.
What'd you say?
No, like, he's like, there's a lot to be discussed. Like, no, Michael Shermer said it all. Men are men, women are women.
There's really not much about that. On the transgender issue. There's not much to discuss, especially on the transgender women in sports. There's not much to discuss. It's no. It's so fucking obvious, and that's one of the worst parts of any of these cynical theories, is that what they try to do is make the obvious obscure. And it's because to anybody, once you get closer and closer to the line dividing two different things, that's when the line gets blurrier, right? Once you get closer and closer to the line dividing male and female, that's when you can say, well, what about these people who have XY chromosomes, but they produce small gametes and they don't have a uterus and they blah, blah, blah. Like, well, they clearly look a male. So fuck off, they're a male. I don't know. Like, and plus that's an edge case. Like, stop getting so close to the boundary that you try to blur it, and stop pretending that blurring of the boundary really close means anything for the subcategories at large.
Yeah. Is that a new guitar behind you?
Oh, yeah, it is. Well, I was actually looking at a really expensive one, and I'm probably going to get it. And this is
which one is that?
This is one I got to beat up and toss around after I get the expensive one and keep it in the case too much.
A Yamaha.
Yeah, it's a Yamaha. So it was just like $800, but I'm gonna get a what's it called, a Bendel, and it's like $5,000.
Jeez.
Yeah. This one, yeah, I mean it's like $1,000. It plays really well though. I mean, Yamaha.
I'm like bragging about my $1,300 Kepma. That's the most expensive guitar.
I shouldn't have said that. Now I gotta go get guns. I didn't want to be a gun owner. No, just kidding. Yeah, I might be playing like a solo gig at a restaurant coming up here. If anybody's around 8 distilleries in June, I'm gonna go try to do an acoustic solo gig there, and might do some banjee and play on that thing and try to roll on it alone, because I've been running around the band too much, and I'm gonna play a bunch of goofy songs. And then I've talked to these guys. Maybe these guys will come play with me and play a song or two at some point or another, if we can ever get around each other to practice one. And we've still been talking about, and we're going to do our woke hymns, and that's been one of our original ideas, and we've never put them together. I just want this is the last thing on this, because they can't get through a damn episode nowadays without
one of the questions I would have liked to ask him, although we didn't have enough time, was about the book Sapiens, Noah Harari. You know, what do you think he feels about the idea that a myth,
the new Bible, man, it's a new, and Bill Reel said it's the new Bible, and I think it's poop. I think it's poop. Is what I think of it. I just think it's poo. Why we got through that? But yeah, props to them for daring to talk that stuff.
Yeah, he brought it up. That's nice. I thought that would be a no-go for him. I thought he'd tell Shermer beforehand, don't bring up trans stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a fun week. I mean, I have to give, like, again, I have to give props to them, like Bill Reel and all that stuff. They're talking about stuff that will kind of make them have to confront it a bit more. And like I said in that transgenderism episode, the transhumanism episode, the guy who's actually the proponent of it is actually a really measured guy of saying like, yeah, this could all blow up in my face and not go very well too. And when he says that, it kind of makes Bill Real and the other lady kind of stop and go, yeah, I can see that there's like a lot of problems with what's upcoming too, instead of just assuming it's all going to go to the good, to the the historicism. What is that Karl Popper book? It's Popper Historicism. It's called The Poverty of Historicism. That's one of those words, those philosophy words that people don't philosophy, because historicism sounds like I'm talking about the past, which is, I think you can blame Marx for it, because whenever we pointed that out in Hail Caesar, where all those Marxists are sitting around talking like, history, right? They had this way of winking each other, history.
Yeah.
And in Marx, it means the future. It means talking about the future. Historicism is from your great good judgment of the past or whatever, your dialectical materialism or whatever. And it even pops up a little bit in some of this, transhumanism. Your belief, you think that you can tell us right how the future is for sure going, and it's going to go that way. And they get dogmatic about it. And Popper had a whole book about, actually, he kind of created the term, just like they said, falsifiability has to be an important part of your world, which Popper's famous for. He's also famous for taking on historicism. He's also famous for the idea of repressive tolerance. No, that's Marcuse. Marcuse took it to the next level. He was the one who talked about the paradox of tolerance, and then Marcuse took it to another level, because the whole idea that Popper said is, as long as they're willing to talk, no matter what it is, it's good. But when they start saying we can't talk, we gotta ban you, we gotta, all that sorts of stuff, we can't. And most of these critical theories, they have right in their theories about how you're not allowed to talk to the evil white hetero whatever person. They say it right outright. But as soon as you can't talk, that's when you have to be intolerant of that thing. But as long as you can talk, you can be tolerant of the thing. But then Marcuse took that and ran the whole distance and said, no, we just must be intolerant of that, which is what we declare ontologically evil.
Shit.
So are we the wise are now than the fools of the past? Absolutely not.
Probably not.
No, nothing's.
I just
nothing's-
I can't get any wiser.
Some people are. Some things are. I don't know. Hey, Charlie, puppy. Yeah, let's. Oh, it's got the things in there. Anyway, should we do
Minor
something?
chord.
Here's a little ditty I like to call, why don't we all just be nice and empathetic toward each other?
Be nice and empathetic. Be nice and empathetic.
There we go.
Anyway, should we call it good, or is there more stuff to talk about? We didn't talk about any pop stuff. How's the Zelda going?
It's great.
Yeah, you guys
like
keep
it.
talking about it. It's giving me such a raging boner for that game.
I'm deciding
It's
that I like to. I didn't care for the story of Breath of the Wild. I thought it kind of bumped me out because it was fun. And I love the game, but the story was not Zelda, And I was sad because I love Zelda, but this game, I don't know. There's this weird sort of respectful passing of the torch that is the opposite of what I've seen in most of woke Hollywood these days. Like now it seems like passing of the torch is like the new generation wrenching the torch from the old generation and not learning anything from them. But in Zelda, there's everywhere I go, even the side quests, it's like the young learning from the old and vice versa, and them compromising. It's really kind of a cool thing. I found a cool meme I posted in the group to do with pop culture.
Pop culture's memes?
Yeah, I found a pop culture meme. And not really a meme, it's just a stupid thing that happened.
Is it in the group? Which one?
The Facebook group.
Oh, the first one before Flips?
Yeah.
The Margot Robbie?
Yeah.
I don't have many celebrity crushes. I kind of have a crush on her a little bit.
Well, she's very attractive.
Oh, is that way? Should I do this one? Let's do this one. People can project sex. Oh, I was doing it. Oh man, you called me out before I even. Margot Robbie on Barbie being sex. Oh man, I'm called out. People can project sex onto her. Yes, she can wear a short skirt, but because it's fun and pink, not because he wanted you to see her butt.
She's and I'm like, I thought about this for a little bit, and it reminded me of one of my big apologies I had to make in my life was like I have this cousin who got like she's very pretty and she got very into like modeling when we were in high school, and she posted this picture, a lot of these pictures of her posing in kind of a bikini, and I was such a dick about it, like being like, oh yeah, it takes a lot of effort to like pose half naked on a motorcycle or whatever, but it wasn't like disgusting and slutty and stuff like that. So later in life I thought about it a little bit and I was like, you know what, no, okay, she's just kind of like she's worked hard on her body. She's a bodybuilder. She's buff.
Yeah.
And she's worked very hard on her body, harder than I've ever worked on mine. And she's proud of it. And she ought to be proud of it. And if you're proud of a thing, you should show it off. And that's what I think about Margot Robbie here. I wish Margot Robbie just tell everybody, look, I've worked hard on my body, so I'm showing it off. And then I wouldn't shit on it. But now she's trying to have it's like she has to have it both ways. She has to be like, no, this isn't sexual at all. Like, no, it's clearly a little bit sexual. You're very attractive, and that's because of
what was that channel
it's
that
the
effort that you put into it.
It's the supremacist ideology of feminism, where like they get to have everything every way, because like, for example, like, the just last week or the last couple of weeks with the Down syndrome Barbie. Like, my entire life, the message I heard from feminism was that Barbie is bad for little girls because it provides an unrealistic body image, but it's good for little Down syndrome girls. Okay, like, fine if you say so, but just understand that you're completely, contradicting the last 40 years of what you've been telling me about Barbie dolls. Like, I thought you were full of shit the whole time, but just so you know. Yeah, I sent that one just because, goddamn.
How young is too young to talk to your kids about rap? For one, louder than a riot hoe. The arrival of a bee-loving toddler changed everything about how he hears hip-hop, especially women's place within it. Well, at least they're addressing misogyny in rap now, man.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Well, off to Zelda it up. Just kidding. I gotta walk Charlie. I never get to play, man. I never get to play. How far are you into Zelda, you think, Jared? You got pretty far into it?
As far as so it gives you those first 4 objectives, and I've done 2 of them, but I'm spending a lot of time on the side stuff.
Yeah, you're farther than me still.
I take my time with these.
Yeah, I tend to be like
that. This one's gonna take me a thing.
And Skyrim type games where like I'm happy to just go down every little rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You should play this one, Flip. This one's good.
Yeah, no, someday I'd like to get a Switch. Although that thing's like in the completion.
Soy boy, you're a soy boy.
I should play. I need to play the Breath of the Wild because I never played that one. I've played 0.0 minutes of any Zelda game since.
You can borrow my Breath of the Wild if you have a switcheroo that you can play on.
I don't have it. I don't have a switcheroo. My next computer system, I hope to get a PC next, but we'll have to see. Alas.
Yesterday I was watching the old school Magnificent Seven while I was playing Zelda. Streeter said he's been listening to the Gulag Archipelago while he's playing it. And
man, that's a trip.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Alrighty.
Hold on a
What,
second.
You got another one?
It's not another one, but it's just a. I've played the clip before, but
it's gonna be a slutty chick playing guitar. You son of a bitch.
Oh, I should. We stopped doing those.
I know we haven't done them in a while. Like I keep meaning to pull.
The algorithm figured out we were bored with it already.
I know. I haven't been getting them.
Yeah, they
I don't know what happens if I get a dumb
and playing guitar.
I've showed this before, but this is always a good thing. It calls like because Kara was talking about her happy nihilism type stuff. And Vanderclay called it out one time, and I like it.
I understand happy nihilism. It's exactly what Sam Harris is offering. Well, I'm dying here. I've actually won the victory. I've shredded the vampire's wings. He likely won't be able to escape, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Life is a dream. I am everything. Now, here's the problem with this. They didn't say that when they were on a meaningful mission to stop evil. It didn't matter. It mattered when they had to burn the boats to keep the vampires from going out into the world. It mattered when she basically sacrificed her life in order to shred the vampire's wings to stop the vampires from going to the mainland. All of the lives on the mainland mattered. The world mattered. Everything mattered. And with your nice, pretty, nihilistic...
One last little clippy.
It mattered when she basically sacrificed her life in order to shred the vampire's wings to stop the vampires from going to the mainland mattered. The world mattered. Everything mattered. And with your nice, pretty, nihilistic speech, you undercut the whole thing. And that's the problem. You cut out the good with the bad with that speech. Because if the tragedies don't matter, neither do the glories.
Name a Jeeba Christ man.
Jeeba Christ for the win.
Are you ready to say Christ is king yet, Jared, or are you getting kicked off the podcast? You get banned.
Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Oh, okay, that one counts.
Subhanallah.
That's
right.
my analogy, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, Christians don't force me to say Christ is king. So, Caitlyn Jenner, please don't force me to pretend that you're a real woman because you're not. I'll let you pretend. I'll never stop you from pretending, but I don't want to pretend with you.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Okay, laters.
See ya.